The epidemic here is worse than previously estimated, much worse.
The message that's been pushed on us, it's your fault you're fat.
Shouldn't be so hard to get them to run around and play, right?
They have voracious appetites and they don't exercise enough.
It's about how active our kids are.
Forget about it.
There are 600,000 food items in America. 80% of them have added sugar.
Your brain lights up with sugar just like it does with cocaine or heroin. You're going to become an addict.
You end up with one of the great public health epidemics of our time.
This is the first generation of American children expected to lead shorter lives than their parents.
I am 12 years old, and my doctors have said that I am a statistic.
We're blaming willpower, and it's a crime.
Over 95% of all Americans will be overweight or obese in 2 decades.
We're toast as a country. The sugar industry is extraordinarily powerful. They're in business to make money, not to keep America healthy.
What if our whole approach to this epidemic has been dead wrong?
The government is subsidizing the obesity epidemic.
We've placed private profit ahead of public health. Systematic political failure.
By 2050, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have diabetes.
Those diseases are being driven by sugar.
This is the fundamental problem nobody's talking about in society.
We could cure 80% of the problem where they prepared the food in the school.
Tomato paste is a vegetable? Really?
Junk food companies are acting very much like tobacco companies did 30 years ago.
I would reject entirely any argument that they are in any way harmful.
Lying through their teeth.
Kids are being told the biggest lie they will ever hear in their lives.
Ronald McDonald never sells to children. He informs and inspires through magic and fun.
If a foreign nation were doing that to our children, we would defend our families.
Years from now, we're going to say, I can't believe we let them get away with that.
You have to change the diet of America.
It's all preventable.
Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. Got a lot to cover. I'm going to try to do it my best way and just keep it step by step. Before we get started, I thought this was pretty funny in a very sick kind of way. Bill Gates said he thinks it's insane that Elon Musk is allowed to destabilize politics in other countries. One thing you could always count on with a psychopath, they really don't know how to read the room. For Bill Gates to think that what Elon Musk is doing is insane to destabilize politics in other countries really matches what his involvement with who you going to call and all those people are, right? And on the latest on Elon Musk, I guess they're going to go into Fort Knox. Yeah, I did a show about that years ago. I highly doubt there was any gold at Fort Knox. Fort Knox and gold are still alive today. Everybody on social media wants to sell you gold that they will hold for you. I guess nobody ever considers when the grid goes down, how are you going to get that gold back from those people? Hey, I think gold is one big trick in general, but you do you. If you want to stack up all that gold and believe that the U.S. is sitting on a pile of gold, hey, fantasies happen every day. Just this week, the Washington Post is facing criticism after backing out of a 6-figure deal to advertise Fire Elon Musk, this advertising campaign. The advertising was going to cost $115,000 paid for by an advocacy group. Well, that's pretty interesting. They sure use a lot of advertising on social media to sell you stuff, now, don't they? All those vitamins, all those things. They use advertising on social media to blow up their own people, make them look like they're really popular. And who pays for that? Well, the advertisers. Now, if I still worked in corporate marketing and I happened to be in charge of the advertising for my company that I was working for, I might question where some of this ad revenue is going. But hey, not my deal. It is all a big trick. But I am not going to spend my time on how they pay each other. But that's how it works, right? All the money flowing all around them to make them more popular, make people want to get more money for themselves, a vicious, vicious cycle. It's coming home to roost because now everybody who voted for Trump can say that they are hated because of what Trump is now doing. So people who didn't vote for Trump can rule over the other people saying, ha, you voted for him, right? And the issue is going to be big. I hope that you will consider staying out of it. We have a dual system for that distinct reason. So you can argue with your relatives over what the elites are doing. Stop carrying their water, because what they're doing now is they're going to be torching most of the farmers. Farmers believed in Trump. Hold on a second. So naturally, when the farmers get hit, food prices keep going up, the nation will turn on the farmers. Keep it straight in your head. The farmers are just a side event to all of this. This is a murder and robbery operation. So yes, of course, they're going to be major league screwing over of the farmers, and they will be blaming the people who voted for Trump on all of that. Because right now, we're living and working in an environment where the only constant is chaos. That is their motto: divide and conquer and rule by chaos. Chaos produces uncertainty that leads to loss of trust. I think eventually people will stop trusting the United States, but not my point at all. Because it's almost laughable how they trip all over each other. Because right now, some of the same Republicans that promised to help the farmers are the ones who are going to be going after the farmers, because this USAID deal, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal for the farmers. Not going to get into all the CIA plots that USAID does to dismantle the entire world, but listen to this part. USAID buys about $2 billion of US farm products. That means that the farmers are going to hit it. So when you go after a cause, make sure you're hitting the right note there, because that will tumble. Taking that $2 billion in aid will tumble a lot of farmers, and that is the end goal. There have been a couple of huge battery fires in this country regarding ion batteries. They have taken place in places like California and Ohio, where it has disseminated all of the fresh vegetables being grown in this country. This is not the fault of the farmers. So before you go around laying blame and accusing somebody of voting for the wrong side, try a little bit of solidarity instead. We all have done crazy things in the past. We all probably voted for a Donald Trump sometime in the past. We all make decisions, and we all grow from those decisions. And attacking each other when you find out there's not going to be any food on the shelves is not going to get you anywhere. Solidarity will get you there, but not attacking the other side. You're doing what they want you to do, because it's all around us. Do you realize Catholic charities in the United States, they raked in billions of tax dollars, and those billions of tax dollars were to shelter illegal immigrants during the Biden administration. Over the last 4 years, the organization collected more than $2 billion in federal grants intended for immigration-related programs. So, this sum makes the Catholic churches, with its 168 U.S. branches, one of the largest private recipients of such funding, which helps shelter and relocate illegals. The Catholic Church is behind a lot of this horror. They're collecting over $2 billion U.S. tax dollars to continue with this horror. The Catholic Charity's main donor was the Department of Health and Human Services, which granted the organization roughly $1.93 billion, according to the report. Other donors included Department of Homeland Security, which forked over more than $156 million, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and another $138 million. FEMA has also donated to the Catholic Church. How can we claim we were fooled? But were we? How can we keep saying we were tricked? Maybe they tricked us, but we kept the tricks alive and contributed to the eugenics. None of us so far have been forced by gunfire. None of us, okay? We stood down and did not stand up. We engaged in going after each other with names and accusations. And at the end of the day, our collective actions fired these weapons. We go along when they manufacture consent for all of these things. Most people claim that they are going to be happy to see migrants ruthlessly booted from this country. They were invited and allowed in. Now people are cheering for their demise to get them out of here. We can only claim the rulers don't have humanity. But we can only speak about our own humanity now, can't we? Cheering on the demise of someone else is a disgusting, psychopathic place to be for the rest of us. Stay out of it all. Try to encourage solidarity. These migrants are going to be having as much trouble as everybody else. They want us to blame the migrants. They want us to blame the people who voted for Trump. They want us to blame all this stuff. But really, before we start pointing the fingers outward, we have to ask ourselves, where were we? How did we fit into all of this? And people sit around saying, well, Jesus is going to fix it all. Well, I got to tell you, Jesus is likely Lucifer. And do you really think, is Jesus going to slap that sugar out of our hands? Is Jesus going to come down and say, hey, sugar or cocaine, who pulls the trigger? Kids cannot get sugar without the help from the adults, can they? It is like a gang of addicts. Who's in charge? The adults. I do better when I understand why. Why dieting? Why fasting? Why all of these things? So what I'd like to share with you today are some reasons why to do all this. These children rely on us as the adults in the room, right? So if we're sitting around with all of these bad habits and treating sugar like, oh, it's just a little treat. Let's just have some ice cream today, kids. Well, I grew up with a woman, and one of her main issues, I remember this story from 50 years ago, okay? How it all happened with her and her weight was her mother. The mother thought ice cream was the answer to good times and bad times. So when things were good or bad, she had the girl and her brother ride their bicycles down to the store, pick up a gallon of ice cream, and then bring it home, and the three of them would eat that gallon of ice cream. Now, those kids couldn't have done anything if that mom had not given them permission to go get the ice cream. They couldn't have gotten the ice cream if mom hadn't given them the money. So you see how it all works? We have much more power than we're trying to act like we have, right? Like, oh, these kids, they just forced us to buy all this candy. What are we going to do about it? Well, we can make a lot of change ourselves, what we can do about it. We can take a stand instead of being like a willow in the wind, blowing with every little thing. We can take a hard, fast stand. There's lots of options, but no option will happen until someone decides they need to take a stand and do it for all the right reasons. These kids are not able to buy the sugar and stuff on their own. We are the enablers, as much as it's painful to say that. I'm going to be going over a lot of things today. Do you realize that, well, you know, the gypsies? Well, the gypsies and the Jews and the mafia. I've been looking into a lot of dates and stuff because you think, well, how are we going to figure out where history was converted? Well, I think a good place to start, I keep talking about that Gilded Age. Do you realize that I've been looking into the mafia? It's kind of a turn off the road here, right? But actually, it makes a great deal of sense. How did the mafia get started? Well, I'll have to get into the how and why. I have 100 years of work in front of me to get there. But basically, the Illuminati created the mafia. I kid you not. So then what they did was they came up with all these ways to keep the mafia working. So, for example, I've been looking at all these dates, right? And funny, I keep finding that all these mafia people happened to land in this country right about the time of the Gilded Age. It seems like they're bringing over their relatives to run things, right? So I think what we're looking at are a couple of groups here. We have the group that came over on the Mayflower, right? They were plotting and scheming to do the overthrow, right? When they burned Washington, destroyed all the records, had the fake Civil War and all that. But then I'm real sure around the late 1800s to early 1900s, those same people that founded this country, the Mayflower crowd, they brought over their relatives to run the mafia, which they created in the late 1800s. Pretty fascinating, right? And those gypsies I keep talking about, well, another very fascinating part of this little history. Funny thing about the gypsies, not much written history. Amazing, isn't it? Nobody wrote down the gypsies' history. Well, I found a couple sources for gypsy history, and it appears to me that the gypsies were always traveling with those Ashkenazi Jews, and along with them came the mafia. And they actually used, I don't want to jump ahead of the mafia story here, so let me think about this for a second. What they used was prohibition to build up the mafia because J. Edgar Hoover, you know, the guy who was really black, who claims he was white, J. Edgar Hoover didn't want to send the FBI in to infiltrate the mob. Now, wasn't that convenient? So they didn't do anything about the mob until it blew up in the 70s. And I keep talking about, yeah, that was when Silicon Valley started. So they didn't even go after the mob until the 70s with the Federal Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, or RICO, that was passed in 1970s as the ultimate hitman in mob prosecutions. Prior to RICO, prosecutors could only try mob-related crimes individually. Since different mobsters perpetrated each crime, the government could only prosecute each criminal instead of shutting down an entire criminal organization. Now, I've been talking about all of our laws are about omissions, right? Just like they allowed traffickers to feed victims through all the hotels around the world because they set up laws that did not include traffickers, right? So they did another carve out with the mobsters. What they did was they could only get them for one crime at a time. And then finally, in the 70s, I guess when they were getting ready to open up Silicon Valley, the government decided to use RICOs. So today, the government rarely uses RICO against the mafia. Instead, because the law is so broad, both governments and civil parties use it against all sorts of enterprises, both legal and illegal. So yeah, the mob was allowed to just run wild through Prohibition, and I will argue till the day that I die, Prohibition was completely hooked up to get the mob in power. So yeah, and this whole thing that I'll be talking more about today with is sugar. Sugar is like a drug. They really haven't done many studies, but there was one review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, and it claimed that refined sugar has a similar effect on the brain as illegal drugs such as cocaine. In studies on rats, it has been found that there are significant similarities between eating sugar and drug-like effects such as binging, craving, tolerance, withdrawal, dependence, and reward. The research scientists claim that sugar alters mood and can induce reward and pleasure in the same way drugs such as cocaine affect the brain. They cite studies in rats where sugar was preferred to cocaine, and studies in mice where the mice experienced sugar withdrawal symptoms. The review looked at all the existing research about sugar and its potential addictive qualities. The lead author said that unlike salt, there is no aversion signal to sugar, a built-in safety mechanism that protects us from eating too much salt. This isn't present in sugar, and so people can eat a lot of it and still want more. Whereas once people have eaten enough salt, they don't want any more. Of the withdrawal symptoms the authors of the review claim are present when giving up sugar completely. Withdrawal symptoms from sugar come from dopamine deficiency in the brain. This may lead to symptoms such as attention deficit activity, and it may also create a similar state of the brain as found in patients with depression. Dopamine deficiency can temporarily be relieved by eating more sugar. So they claim that sugar can override our self-control mechanisms, hence the term sugar fix. According to Public Health in England, sugar intake in England is nearly 3 times the recommended limit, and that consumption of sugar and sugar-sweetened drinks is particularly high in school-aged children. On average, sugar contributes between 12 and 15% of our energy intake, whereas the Commission recommends that sugar should not exceed 5% of our total dietary energy. Eating too much sugar can lead to weight gain, which then increases the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and some cancers. Well, actually, a lot of cancer, and we'll be getting more into that. But sugar also alters our mood and provides feelings of being rewarded and euphoria, hence the comparison to illegal drugs. However, there are opponents of the argument around sugar and addiction, with some other experts disputing the claim. Yeah, they always have their paid-off experts now, don't they? An article in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2010 claimed that there is no support from studies on humans that sugar is physically addictive or that addiction to sugar plays a role in eating disorders. And another study of research on the effects of sugar on rats argued that the addiction-like behaviors that are seen only if the animals are restricted to having sugar 2 hours every day, whereas if they are allowed to have it whenever they want, these behaviors aren't seen. Opponents of the theory argue that there is a reward system in the brain that controls eating behavior. But unlike sugar, illegal drugs such as cocaine hijack those systems and turn the normal controls off. So yes, cocaine and sugar hijack the system and turn the normal controls off. They also argue that rats choosing sugar over cocaine in some experiments is not surprising, as animals will always choose the substance that will give them energy. It's almost kind of like these people are rat mind experts, right? What all scientists agree on is that people should try and reduce the amount of sugar in their diet. While some argue that cutting off sugar completely means we won't get addicted, others reason that there are much more nutritional foods that we should be eating instead. Sugar doesn't offer anything from a nutritional perspective, and filling the diet with sugar can lead to overeating and weight gain. They claim that it is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. Psychology Today defines a person with addictions as someone who uses a substance or engages in a behavior for which the rewarding effects provide a compelling incentive to repeat the activity, despite detrimental consequences. Addiction may involve the use of substances such as alcohol, inhalants, opioids, cocaine, and nicotine, or behaviors such as gambling. The colloquial use of addiction tends to mean we're obsessed with something, whether it be a new Netflix series or your favorite frozen yogurt joint. To a scientist, however, addiction is placing a behavior in a whole new ballpark. It means that the person quite literally has no control over their behavior. The stimuli has affected their brain so dramatically that the user has become dependent on it. Now, you might not suffer withdrawal symptoms from gambling or porn addiction, but you probably will. The damage is done, and sometimes it's permanent. The average American consumes 17 teaspoons every day. Sugar, conversely, does have withdrawal symptoms if you quit cold turkey. So, of all the sweet receptors in the they say that the sweet receptors in the human brain evolved at a time when our diets didn't contain all that much sugar. All you have to do is look at a simple chart and see that the escalation of sugar over everything, and I am here to die on this hill. The reason sugar is in everything because they know it creates cancer, death, heart attack, horrible reactions amongst children, all kinds of behavioral issues. That is why we have sugar in everything. So, as a result, those receptors get overloaded by processed food and make the brain release abnormal amounts of endorphins, the happy chemicals. Have you ever seen somebody's eyes if they have a true addiction to sugar and stuff? And it's really something to watch because they describe it as a sweet treat. It's like, oh, we all deserve a treat today. They have really elevated sugar in our minds to this thing that if you don't want some sugar, oh, come on, you could have a little bit of sugar. What's wrong with just one cookie? Oh, come on. You're going to raise your child without letting them have any cookies or ice cream? What kind of parent are you? When really, what we should be saying is, wait a minute, why are you giving your children sugar? Don't you realize we're creating eugenics with our own children? We are the ones that are loading the gun, is what I'm trying to tell you. We are the ones that are pulling the trigger. Please try to hear what I'm saying. They know how the brains work. They know how refined sugar works. And the profits are huge in the billions for companies like Coca-Cola and all these pushers of sugar. As a result, getting these overloaded things within our system does not really know how to operate with all of this sugar. So essentially, we're taking money that you're working very hard to earn to support your family, and I'm trying to say this in the kindest way that I can. We are, in fact, agreeing with their eugenics method. When we take that cookie and hand it to that child and say, oh, come on, that kid could have that little cookie. We have bought the program. We are the addicts that they're all talking about, right? And I have a piece down here about Oprah. Oprah, I swear that woman is just a pain in the tail. She's probably wearing a fat suit. I don't even know if Oprah's really that fat or not, right? But Oprah has always been in there pushing and pushing and pushing fat people, saying, oh, it's okay to be fat. We're all fat. We all eat too much. Well, explain to me this. Oprah is now pushing all those dangerous drugs, those Ozempics, those drugs that are going to be killing people. And she's always pitted thin people against fat people. Just pay a little bit closer attention to Oprah. Maybe I keyed into her earlier because I happen to be thin, but she is a destructive person against thin people. She's made statements saying, you know, I used to always think that thin people had more willpower. But that's not true, she says. She says they don't have that noise in their heads telling them they're hungry all the time. And that is 100% lying. Of course, we all feel the same impulses towards sugar. Just because I'm thin doesn't mean I don't feel the addictive pull of sugar. I told you in the 70s we were all doing cocaine. I've done both sides of the fence, right? So, but I will be back with more about this cocaine stuff later, but not for today. But anyway, so yeah, so Oprah making these statements about, well, thin people just don't think like we do. No, it is about willpower. 100% it's about willpower. You would not catch me in the grocery store wandering down the cookie aisle. You probably wouldn't catch me in the grocery store wandering down the Coca-Cola aisle because with willpower, I avoid those things. Sometimes I absolutely could not control myself when I'd be out shopping. So what I would do, instead of picking up a 12-pack of Coke, I would just allow myself to have one Coke. So yeah, I was rationalizing in my own brain the little tricks that I was using to avoid sugar. So instead of cruising the cookie aisle and getting a big pack of cookies, I might justify it by saying, well, I'll just eat a small pack of cookies. Because that is how addiction works, right? Because I've known my whole life that I cannot bring a big box of cookies into my home and have any success with it. I have to manage what comes into my home. And I manage that by not buying it and bringing it home and feed it to myself or other people. So it is about also accepting personal responsibility. Just because Coca-Cola is making a bunch of garbage, does that mean that we should buy it and feed it to our children? Well, no, of course that doesn't mean that. Doesn't even mean it for a second. But we have interpreted it to mean that way. So if you really want to be nice to your kids, you'll buy them Coca-Cola too, right? Put that happy smile on their face. And I have some other things I'll be talking about more later. So I'm going to put this on hold for a sec. I got a few things I want to cover today. I want to cover this narco trade, and I know it's going to sound, why am I talking about narco trade in the middle of sugar? I don't know. But anyway, so let me put this on hold for a second. I'm having a lot of trouble with radiation, if you can't tell, so I'm feeling a little fuzzy today. So let me put that on hold and get myself wrapped around this again. So anyway, so because I was focusing on sugar this week, I also took another spin around the cocaine business. Well, the cocaine business is running through the Netherlands, okay? And this is all about the law of omission, right? And those gypsies. Over in Amsterdam and Brussels, they have two of the largest seaports that service Europe, okay? First good thing about them, right? Big seaports bring in lots of drugs, right? You could actually, I don't know if you could do that today, but as of a year or two ago, if I was in Antwerp, I could literally walk around that dock, okay? Yeah, pretty alarming, the things that are going on in those docks. But what's going on is this, is there are seaports over in Brussels. Well, they're coming in through Netherlands, then the cocaine is routing up through Brussels. And I talked before about that hash route, but let me give you some more specific names here, because today is going to be kind of a jumble of a few things, and then I've got more specifics down below here. So right over there, they have these groups of Moroccans, okay, in Amsterdam. And allegedly, the neighborhood in the north of Amsterdam, they were formed at a time when the Netherlands decided to legalize hashish. It's always about cause and effect, right? So the Netherlands decided to legalize hashish. And then they began to control the coffee shops. And then with the profits, they decided to go further. Cocaine and amphetamines. Almost all of them are Dutch-born in the 80s from Moroccan families with few resources. So there is this term that you need to pay attention to over there, and it's called this. It's called Morocco, Mokoro Mafia. Okay. So what I'll be tracking in a bit here is the similarities between this Mokoro Mafia, which emerged in the 1990s, and it controls a third of Europe's cocaine market, and working mainly from Belgium and the Netherlands. Mokoro Mafia. Remember, last I left off, I was looking over around right across the water from Spain there. And let me see here. So now Belgium. Our friends over in Belgium, head of NATO, is the cocaine capital of Europe. So between the 1990s and the 2025s, that is how they took over that area and made it a major drug transport. And I'll be able to show you some parallels, not today, but in a bit, of how they used this exact same plan when they founded the Mafia here in the United States. They founded the Mafia here in the United States and let it grow wild for a number of years before they tried to rein it back in again. They set up the exact same plan in Belgium, in the Netherlands, but what they're claiming is happening from the people in Morocco. Now, I don't believe the story about the Moroccan people. I believe it is run by Moroccan people, but somebody above them is probably not Moroccan, is what I'm saying. There's so much robbery going on. So much robbery everywhere. Did you know that the U.S. troops are always involved in drugs and transporting drugs around the world? Now, I don't know that for a fact, but if you look at the shows I've done about Afghanistan, it seems like I'm not the only suspicious person. And just to show you how deep the robbery is, I should have moved this later, but I didn't. So I found this piece this week, and you would think that when the U.S. military has soldiers, right? When you join the military and you go live on a base and stuff like that, fight for your country, you would kind of assume they'd pay for your food, wouldn't you? So what happens is that they collect money from U.S. troops, and it's called kind of like a tax on the troops. And what it is they get their basic pay, their BAS payment of $460 a month, and it's automatically deducted from paychecks of service members who live in barracks. The program is intended to help enlisted men and women to cover food costs. So if you live on base, they don't feed you for free, I just found this fascinating, right? They get these people to work for next to slave wages to join the U.S. military. Then they take $460 per month out of their paycheck to pay for their food. But records from the 11 largest military bases show in 2024 alone, $151 million out of the $225 million garnered from the soldiers was not spent on food. So they charge soldiers $225 million, but they didn't spend it on food. What they spent it on was junk. So more than 50% of the money from soldiers' pay had been redirected from food services. It is unknown what the redirected money is being spent on. That number is possibly higher, considering that U.S. Army operates 104 garrisons, all of which use the same program. In one example, in Fort Stewart, Georgia, they collected $17 million from soldiers, but spent $2.1 million on the food. That means that 87% of food funds were redirected for other projects, according to the report. All but 2 bases reviewed left more than half of the money for food unspent, according to the report. Stealing food money from our soldiers is not how we achieve military readiness, said one of the members of Congress. The fact that at least $151 million was collected from soldiers and not spent on food as required demands not just an immediate investigation, but swift accountability. Excuse me. So, everywhere you look, excuse me. I got to put this on hold. Okay. And in more mafia-like information, do you realize that the canned tomato business, I told you this is a weird association of shows. The canned tomato business is run by Italy. Italy is the source of more than 80% of all global canned tomato exports and a fifth of tomato paste. I should have moved this to my Mafia file, but I didn't. But anyway, so they even have the Mafia involved in tomatoes, okay? So and they use these migrant centers over in Italy. I'll be getting to these migrant centers in a bit here, not today, but in a bit. But so they're setting up these migrant centers in Italy, right, where they're bringing in these boatloads of migrants to help them out. Well, they park them in these migrant centers where they can't work for a while until they're getting paperwork or whatever they claim they're getting them, right? So what they're using now is at one of the migrant centers they controlled until recently was described as a cash point for the mafia and a convenient slave labor pool. So this group in Italy, the Nacarati, control an estimated 80% of Europeans' cocaine trade. So the Italians, how this is all going to work out will air itself out over the next bit here, okay? But the Italians are also in this cocaine business, okay? And this will all intersect here at some point. Unless, of course, they put a bullet to my head for talking about it. But, hey, that'll be another day, right? So anyway, so when you look at the mafia and stuff, don't always just look at what they're doing in trading arms and wars and all that stuff, because this is something that is so simple right there in the middle, right? So the same group that's controlling the tomatoes, and I'm just saying this because I love odd details, okay? So I find it fascinating that in order to hide their mafia money, the main group in Italy is, they found that is just as profitable as selling drugs and can be used to launder the billions of euros out of narcotics proceedings by using tomatoes. So what's going on with these tomatoes? Well, I'm not going to get too involved in the tomatoes today because it's kind of an aside, but actually, they moved the tomato business into China for cheaper tomato prices and canning prices, and now I read they're moving it into Africa. So that was one way that the Italians are cleaning up. So how do the Italians over there in Italy, who control the cocaine thing, how do they integrate with the people over in the Netherlands? Well, we'll have to get there in a bit. But we're just right now trying to identify what groups we're looking at, right? So I'm gonna skip ahead here. I'm trying to get this show done today the best I can. I'm very something is going on around here, and I'll hopefully talk about it at the end. But for now, I just really want to get through this show. I'm actually starting to blow up from the inside out. So yeah. So let's talk about what are some of the interesting things you can do. Well, some people talk about fasting. Well, I believe 100% in fasting now. And when I talked about this in the last several months, because the American Heart Association came out and said that fasting is a bad idea. Well, I think it's a great idea. Anything they say is a bad idea, we should immediately take a look at, right? What they say is this. They say an 8-hour time-restricted eating links to 91% higher risk of cardiovascular death. So the American Heart Association, always a wonderful source of information, they said that fasting links to a 91% higher risk of cardiovascular death. So this is what their research highlights are. And keep in mind, they call this research, but it really isn't. It's something else, but I'll get to that in a minute. They said a study of over 20,000 adults found that those who followed an 8-hour time-restricted eating schedule, a type of intermittent fasting, had a 91% higher risk of death from cardiovascular disease. So I guess not eating for 8 hours gives you higher risk for heart disease. People with heart disease or cancer also had an increased risk of cardiovascular death. And this is, I found just amazing. I guess people just eat constantly because that's why they have snacks, right? Snacks and drinks. Compared with a standard schedule of eating across 12 to 16 hours per day, limiting food intake to less than 8 hours per day was not associated with living longer. Abstracts presented at the association's scientific meetings are not peer-reviewed. Rather, they're curated by independent review panels and are considered based on the potential to add to the diversity of scientific issues and views discussed in the meeting. So right there, they're saying, we didn't really review this stuff, but we think you ought to take a look at it, right? The association receives funding primarily from individuals, foundations, and corporations, including pharmaceutical, device manufacturers, and other companies. They also make donations and fund specific association programs and events. But you can rest assured the association has strict policies to prevent these relationships from influencing the science content. So that's what they're saying. They're saying just keep eating. Don't stop eating. Don't make any breaks in eating. Well, then we better be ready to accept the outcome. The outcome is global cancer rates are predicted to rise more than 75% by 2050. according to the World Health Organization. Latest figures from the Who You Gonna Call Cancer Arm, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, makes plain the growing burden of cancer, rising from 14.1 million new cases and 8.1 million worldwide deaths in 2012 to 20 million new cases and 9.7 deaths a decade later. The IARC predicts there will be more than 35 million new cancer cases by 2050, an increase of 77% from 2020 levels, and that deaths have nearly doubled since 2012 to more than 18 million. The IARC said tobacco use, alcohol consumption, and obesity were key factors behind the increasing evidence of cancer, as well as population aging and growth. Well, as far as alcohol consumption, alcohol is highly loaded with sugar. As far as tobacco use is also highly leveraged with sugar. That's why you keep lighting up more and more cigarettes, because they actually cure the tobacco using sugar. So all of those things come from sugar, right? Let me see here. So how is this going to affect everybody? Well, people are putting more and more sugar in things. People are we now have people all over social media talking about how to do things other than using sugar, but actually in pretty disturbing ways. It all starts with this idea of snacking, right? The snack and beverage industry. Because the snack and beverage industry is huge in this country. It is absolutely monstrous, right? And sugar also disrupts a hormone called leptin, which is responsible for regulating hunger. So yeah, if you eat a lot of sugar, of course you're going to be hungrier. Leptin can inhibit appetite and reduce overall body weight, but eating sugar can lead to leptin resistance, which can increase our appetites and lead to overeating. And even when we think we're making healthy choices, sugar and its empty calories can sneak up on us. Studies have shown that foods labeled low fat, non-fat, or lower calorie actually have higher sugar content than their regular counterparts. So, also, our dietary guidelines have been manipulated. The dietary guidelines from America, it wasn't even published until the 1980s. Imagine that. Yeah, I think people in my mother's generation, they understood these things. My parents were only high school graduates. They didn't go to college to learn this stuff. My mom did not put sugar in the house. She was an excellent cook. She could make anything, but we had a pie maybe once every several months. We hardly ever got baked cookies. If we went out to eat, which was rare, we got one soda. Parents had better boundaries. There was no arguing over, oh, can't we have another soda? I really want one more. No, that wasn't how it worked. That was not how it worked. You got your one soda and you're happy to get your one soda. It didn't create this whole turmoil of things. So, yeah, so Americans have gone along with the government telling us what to eat for a very long time. And what they're saying is they say that the new guidelines say that people have at least 2.5 cups of beans and lentils per week. So, and they recommend replacing things, but they really don't ever tell you why, right? So, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which was first published in 1980, provided advice on what you eat and drink to meet nutritional needs and prevent disease. And the very same people giving us advice right now are the very same people telling us to eat more sugar. They did that. Who was that Harvard group that took $50,000 to claim that sugar did not cause inflammation, which is not true? So let me see here. I got to see where we get off here. I'm about ready to finish up this show, so let me just keep scrolling along here. I really got some crazy comments in this show this week. So I think in summary, I could go on and on, but I don't want to go on and on about this. We are a culture addicted to sugar. The average is 17 teaspoons a day. That equals 68 grams of sugar or 2 12-ounce cans of soda. Let's be clear about one thing. Sugar, specifically added sugar, is poison. Sugar also disrupts our hormones, that leptin. And even when we think we're making healthy choices, sugar and its empty calories can sneak up on us. People need to learn to read sugar counts on packaging. So what they say is this. They say, well, these are just really advisories. The committee doesn't just suggest having more beans and lentils. It recommends using them to replace how much. Yeah, well, that's never going to work. So anyway, the dietary guidelines were published as a nutritional needs to prevent disease. The recommendation to get proteins from plants first is a big shift. So they're now saying they're going to be recommending this, but I need to just close this subject off. I don't think it really means anything. If you're interested in all this vaccine business, there's a big book that came out, and it's called I'll just read you this piece. According to a well-known story in the scientific community, an elderly woman approached a famous scientist shortly after he concluded his lecture on cosmology and the structure of the solar system. Your beautiful theory about the Earth being round and rotating around the sun is very interesting, young man. Unfortunately, it is also very wrong. I have a better theory, the woman told him. And what would that theory be, madame? The scientist responded. Well, what you call planet Earth is not actually round at all. Actually, it is kind of a large flat disk that rests on the shoulders of 4 giant elephants. And what do those 4 elephants stand on? The scientist inquired. They stand on the back of a giant turtle, the elderly woman answered. And what does that turtle stand on? The scientist asked with an inquisitive grin. On another bigger turtle. And what does the second turtle stand on? Well, my dear man, said the elderly woman with a victorious smile, it's turtles all the way down. So anyways, it's a book called Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine, Science, and Myths. So if you have any interest in all the specifics about why the vaccines are all lies, then you might want to take a look at that book. I got to put some hold second. They're also calling this AI boom. They're calling it Stargate, and it's the Microsoft project called Stargate. And they're claiming a lot of what they're pushing on this AI. I could have this all wrong. I don't really know, but what they're saying is they're going to pull money out of all this cancer research and all this stuff because what they're claiming is that AI will take care of it all under the Stargate deal. Well, they tried this once before. There was a program. IBM had this robot called Watson. It was called IBM's Watson, Watson. And what it was it's called machine learning the hard way. And it started in Jeopardy, the show Jeopardy, ended in a loss. IBM's flagship AI, Watson's Health is what it was called, has been sold to venture capitalists for an undisclosed sum thought to be around $1 billion, or a quarter of what the division cost IBM in acquisition since it spun off in 2015. Not the first nor the last massively expensive tech business screw-up, but isn't AI supposed to be the future? Isn't IBM supposed to be good at this? It all started so well. One of Watson's early set pieces was taking a complex set of symptoms and finding the most probable diagnosis out of an encyclopedic knowledge of rare diseases. A different challenge marked its demise. Like a corpse with a broken neck, 15 bullet holes and a strong smell of cyanide, it raised the question, which massive failure actually finished it off? A good doctor takes a comprehensive history. So let's start at birth. The first most people knew of IBM Watson was in 2011 when it used its natural language processing and capacious knowledge model to win the Jeopardy game, an American TV show game. A PR and marketing coup. IBM lost no time in launching Watson Health off the back of it. With this sort of automated analytics, the company promised doctors could diagnose more accurately, more swiftly, and at less expense. Treatments would be precisely targeted for more patients. A revolution in healthcare was underway. That's a lot to promise off the back of a game show, but IBM was bullish. Shiny new Manhattan headquarters unveiled with an immersion room that put punters and journalists inside a planetarium where Watson could display its fabulous talents. Institutional and commercial partners were signed up for co-development deals, and the magic of turning hype into reality kicked off. IBM tried to bypass that by buying other companies with successful AI medical products to absorb their goodness, but Watson consistently rejected the transplants. In 2019, IEEE Spectrum, the flagship magazine of the American Professional Body for Electronic Engineering, reported that around 50 partnerships had been announced since launch between IBM, Watson, and healthcare organizations. It listed 20 of the highest profile ones with such august bodies as the Mayo Clinic, American National Organizations for Cancer, Cardiology, and Oncology Research, and numerous hospitals and companies. None had produced usable tools or apps. At the time, we can't speak of today, Watson Health didn't seem to work. It is usually possible to fudge such misinformation in business technology because stats can be dressed up, returns on investment left agreeable, fuzzy, and sufficient fig leaves plucked in and donned for CIOs to move on without shame to the next failure. Medicine uses real statistics. It publishes. It checks outcomes because it is not selling widgets. It tries to keep people not dead, ideally happily so. When clinical trials were published, Watson came up short every time. It didn't matter what field it was in. It consistently scored less than human clinicians, sometimes under 50%, and demonstrated some alarming blind spots in suggesting treatments. Medical professionals had enough to worry about without babysitting a broken AI. It got dropped. So we have some choices to make. They say that 1 out of 4 will end up with cancer. We live in pollution. How do you want to stay on the game board? Can you afford expensive cancer treatments? I would have to say that you want to go very cautiously. And what I'm going to be doing right now, because I'm getting ready to close up this file, I'm going to tell you what I have down below for you to take a look at. And I'll be playing some clips here in a minute. 1 out of 4 people will have cancer, and it is projected much higher rates every year. Are you aware that there's a new study out? 50% of Americans, you read that right, U.S. citizens now read at an 8th grade level. So, I don't think you're going to get your answers from the doctors. I think you're going to get your answers from yourself, and those where answers should have come from in the first place. But all that aside, take back your authority over your own body. And here's some clips I'm going to be playing in a minute here. How to break free from sugar addiction. Is cancer genetically inherited? We've been told a big lie about how we get cancer. Barbara O'Neill did a fabulous piece on fasting for longevity. I have another clip about the truth about seed oils and the disgusting way canola oil is made. You'll think, why are you talking to us about cooking beans? There are so much bad information out there. It is just crazy. People talk about, well, if you're going to make a batch of bean soup or vegetable soup, you don't have to worry about soaking your beans ahead of time. Just throw them into the pot. It'll work itself out. No, it doesn't work itself out. I have a clip that I'll play you about why you need to soak your beans first and what happens when you quit sugar for 7 days. So, and then there's a new thing out. It's called the glutamine. And I will be playing that clip also. That professor, I have this broken down to 3 groups for you. Let me see here. I have Barbara O'Neill's information, I have the professor's information, and then I also have Dr. Lustig. Those 3 people, pay attention to those 3 people, and you won't go wrong, okay? So, anyhow, so I'm getting kind of lost here, so I'm going to close this off. I have more information down below about formaldehyde. If you're not opening your windows, looking for trouble, there's 2 clips down below that I could not play. I encourage you, I'm pleading with you to watch those clips. They're clips that people took of babies trying sugar for the first time. Watch that baby's face. The adults stood around laughing. I'm not saying anything against the adults. We didn't know better, but now we know better. Please, let's try to do better. That those babies, they forced the baby to take a bite of sugar. Baby didn't even want it, okay? You can see the baby's brain start to whirl. In just 2 to 3 seconds, that baby has the most violent reaction, the way it viciously grabs at that ice cream cone and slams it up to its face. That is the face of addiction. That is the face of addiction. I've also found a couple of good sources for you. There's this one place called nutritionfacts.org. They publish a lot of data about nutrition. I kept finding bad information about what kind of nuts to eat for cancer, and I kept reading that you should eat peanuts. Well, no, peanuts are really bad for cancer treatment, and I found the right source at that website. I think what you'll find, it's called the nutritional facts. You'll find pretty smart people there, and what they are focused on there is minimal animal and primarily plant. And any studies about what this plant does or that plant does, well, they take care of it, and they'll tell you right there on that website. A couple things that I found interesting. Do you know that over in Ukraine, they're snatching bodies like crazy? Somebody just did a fascinating documentary recently, and I'm wondering, it's Germany and the United States. They're over in Ukraine just snatching babies, bodies, people, blood, everything. And I'm wondering if they're taking these implants to put into stolen organs and stuff. I'm wondering if they have to be white people because, white people are in Ukraine. And there's a reason why they use black people for transplants, but something about why are they using white people in Ukraine for these body parts in the UK, United States and Germany? And another thing I absolutely did not know, Romania. Rome, Adia, the gypsies. Romania is now a bigger NATO base than Germany. Had no idea. They have a huge NATO base in Romania. Gee, isn't that kind of funny, huh? Down with those Roman gypsies. Anyways, there's a lot of links down there. But anyways, Professor Thomas Seyfried, his clip will play also. You can hear in his voice. He's about my age group, and he just started a YouTube channel, and he's already starting to feel the pain of it, I'm guessing, because he's like, don't ask me this, don't ask me. So, yeah, he's talking about there's a missing piece to this research called glutamine, and glutamine carries on to the research from the Warburg thing. Glutamine is new. I don't know about glutamine. When I started reading about glutamine the last couple of weeks, it lost my attention went off it, and then I moved on to the mafia. So you need to pay attention to both sugar and the glutamine. I can't help you on the glutamine because I'm still kind of lost on that one. So anyway, so you want to pay attention. I put them into sections. I have a whole section for Dr. Thomas Seyfried. I would listen to everything this man had to say. I have a whole section about Barbara O'Neill when she talks about DNA repair and her different channels that you can find her up. Dr. Robert Lustig, I've not spoken about him in the past. He's one of the founding doctors in the children and sugar business. He is a fascinating doctor, but here again, they all have different ideas because Dr. Lustig says, well, you could have a drink or two. Well, alcohol is a neurotoxin, so I wouldn't take that advice if I were you. But anyway, so he is very knowledgeable in the children business, and he says that children now have fatty livers like alcoholics. And he did an interesting thing that you might take to heart because no one's really done studies as far as taking kids off of sugars and stuff. But what they did in San Francisco, they took a group of kids who were eating too much sugar and they just put them on a grocery store better version of it. It wasn't like some extreme health food version, but they put the kids on a better version of the junk food they were eating and with less sugar. And what they said was this, it took the kids almost a week before they started coming to their senses because the first 4 or 5 days they were irrational, they had mood swings, but that is because of the high addictive of all of that sugar. So I think it's probably accurate to think that if you got kids and took them off the sugar, they're probably going to act nutty for a week or so. But that should be every reason why you'd want to keep going because you're getting them off of something they're addicted to. And remember, stand tall and you be you. Everybody's going to have an idea about what you should eat or not eat. Just keep it within your own family. You don't need outside approval to not kill your own children, okay? I know that sounds very cruel, but really, we are engaging in the death of children every time we let their little eyes light up over some cereal or something sweet. We are the ones bringing that to them. Also, remember this. Dr. Lustig has written a couple of books. I have both of his books down below. Barbara O'Neill has written a book or so. I have her books also written down below. And just some other things to consider. If you're using things in your kitchen, the black utensils are the worst. What it is when they go to recycle things, when they recycle the computer parts and all that together in a big blob, that's where they come up with the black things from. So if you're buying packaged food, which you shouldn't be buying in the first place, if it comes in a black package, you're making a mistake because I believe you're not going to be able to stop it all, but you do not want to be boiling, burning, or cooking in those plastic containers. Just don't do it. It will cause much more damage because I got rid of my coffee pot a couple of years ago, and I recently stopped drinking coffee after I listened to Barbara O'Neill because once I understand why logically I should be doing something, I'm much better off understanding that part, right? And what I discovered about the coffee pot was, well, I was only drinking 1 cup of coffee a day. And I thought, it's taking up too much room. I don't feel like cleaning a coffee pot. So I switched to this really good South American instant coffee. But anyway, so what I discovered was this, is that your coffee pot inside is all lined with plastic. So I don't think it's a good idea to be boiling water in a coffee pot. So even if you want to keep drinking coffee, I think it's a horrible idea, but don't do it in a coffee pot. It's just like those air fryers. Everybody's got an air fryer, right? Well, I got one on sale. I tried it for a while and I got rid of it because they also coat the inside of those air fryers with, cancer-causing things. So I got rid of the air fryer. I got rid of the coffee pot. You can't go and get rid of everything, but you can get rid of the most horrible things, right? So that's all I've got to say right now. I think I was going to cover more about the gypsies, but here's what I'm going to be doing. I already have it done. I have a timeline about the gypsies and the Jews. And when it folds into the stuff I've been talking about, as far as the Gilded Age and all that, you'll be amazed how closely those gypsies and Jews happen to always be traveling together. And then the actual creation of the mafia being done by the Illuminati. I mean, come on. The mafia didn't just start in a void over there. So I'm going to be closing this off. I wish I could spend time and say more. I realize there's been a lot of subjects for one, but can't forget this part. Down at the bottom of the file here, I have some links to take a look at. I've been talking for a long time. I have one of those ghetto security doors on my front door. Do you know they're on sale now? I guess the United States has a big stock of them because you can add, I bought this door probably 14 years ago. It's the best way to let fresh air into your house. The brand you're looking for is Grisham. And you realize the same door, like I have my front door, doesn't include the lock, but you can get it for $137, including shipping. So yeah, somebody has a big stock on those things hanging around because they are, I found them in a lot of different places. I found some for $250 at Home Depot. You could also make sure you get those windows if you're looking at bars for any of your back windows. But anyway, so I'll have more about the next subject I'll be talking about is this gypsy deal, because I went through a timeline of gypsies to get the gypsies and the gypsies and the Jews organized together. So that way we'll know more about that thing. So be safe out there. Goodbye for now.
If somebody is looking to break free from addiction to sugar and processed foods, what does the process look like? Like, how long do you think it can take for somebody if they're wanting to make this transformation? And like, what are the steps that somebody can take?
If they want to do something about it, the first thing they have to do is admit it. Admitting it is half the battle. Okay. We have a lot of people in denial. All right. That's number one. And if you're in denial, you'll never get better. It's just that simple. You know, you will make excuses, you know, every which way from Sunday as to why this is not a good week, or, you know, I can't do it right now, or blah, blah, blah. You know, the bottom line is the first thing is admitting it. Now, how one can deal with it after. Ultimately, you can't alter an addiction until you've regenerated your dopamine receptors. Your dopamine receptors are at low ebb. If you take the dopamine away, now you have no ligand and fewer receptors. Now you feel really lousy. And we know from both pharmacologic studies in animals, and we also know in human studies with imaging, that it takes at least 3 weeks to repopulate those reward neurons, you know, their dopamine receptors, in order to bring the dopamine receptor level back up. So you now have people in Silicon Valley going on what are known as dopamine fasts, okay, where they lock themselves up in a hotel room and take the screens away and take the M&Ms away and take all of the sugar away and the alcohol away, and basically, you know, read books until their dopamine receptors come back up so that they can feel something. That's pretty remarkable that this is actually a thing. Look, you know, for your audience, look it up. Dopamine fast. How bizarre is that? But that's what we've got. So if your dopamine receptors are at low ebb, if you want to actually feel something, if you've been a cocaine addict and you actually want to feel something, you have to go on a dopamine fast. Now, are there less extreme ways of dealing with this? Of course there are. Can you wean? And the answer is, yeah, of course you can wean. In the same way you can wean heroin, you can wean, cocaine. But then you have to be on a program, you know, where the a dose is being monitored. And the problem is that if the food is so completely overrun with added sugar because the food industry put it there, how are you going to monitor yourself, and how are you going to limit your exposure if the goal is reduction in sugar consumption? Do you even know what is in your food? You know, you can look at the side of the package and say, well, do I know if there's added sugar in here? There are 262 names for sugar, and the food industry uses all of them. So, you know, you don't know what's in it. Did you know Pinocha is sugar? Did you know Demerara is sugar? Evaporated cane juice, you might have been able to figure out, is sugar. Okay, they use strawberry puree, that's sugar. Okay, the point is there's a lot of stuff in your food that you didn't know was there. And so it's very hard to do the weaning because you don't know when you're exposed. What if there was cocaine in all your food and the food industry didn't tell you? How would you avoid it? Same issue.
So if somebody's admitted that they've had a problem, they've paid attention to some of these early warning signs that we've talked about, whether it be denial or, saying you have a sweet tooth, etc., and they want to make this change. If it were you, knowing what you know, how would you do it effectively, and how long do you think it would take you?
So if I wanted to do it effectively, I would basically do it cold turkey. What we've learned, and we actually did this experiment in children, we in 2010 through 2015, we conducted a study here at UCSF. And to this day, I'm still in awe of the results of this study. It's really remarkable. What we did was we took 43 children from our obesity clinic at UCSF with metabolic syndrome, all low socioeconomic status, all high sugar consumers, because that's what their parents fed them, that's what they could afford. And what we did was we studied them on their home diet. We figured out what they were eating on their home diet. We studied them on their home diet. And then for the next 9 days, we took the added sugar out of their diet. We catered their meals 3 days at a time. No added sugar. We took their percent consumption of added sugar as calories from 28% of calories down to 10% of calories. We gave them fruit. That's it. Okay, but all of the rest of their food was no added sugar. Now, we didn't have to make funky food. We just bought it at Safeway, but we chose the food to be no added sugar food because 27% of the grocery store is no added sugar. We controlled for their carbohydrate intake total. We controlled for their protein intake total. We controlled for their fat intake total. We controlled for their fiber intake total. So they ate the same amount of carbohydrate as normal, but instead of sugar, we gave them complex carbohydrate. We gave them starch. We did a starch for sugar exchange. All right? And we gave them a scale. And every day, our coordinator would call them up on the phone, what'd you weigh? And if they were losing weight, eat more in order to keep their weight stable, because we didn't want the naysayers to say, well, of course they got better, they lost weight. We wanted them to stay the same weight or even gain weight for that matter. We did this for 10 days. And then we restudied them on their low sugar, normal calorie, normal carbohydrate diet, but without sugar. So a fructose restricted diet. Okay, glucose added, fructose taken away. And what we saw was remarkable. Every aspect of their metabolic health improved. Their blood pressure went down by 5 points. Their insulin area under the curve went down by 25%. Their glucose area under the curve went down by 8%, even though they were getting more glucose. They had a lactate level at baseline. You're not supposed to have a lactate level at baseline. If you do, that means you have mitochondrial dysfunction, which they did. And that got better. All right. Everything we looked at improved. And their beta cells started working properly. And we published this back in 2016 through 2019, all the data from this. Now, these kids were being sugar restricted on our, makeshift diet. How did they fare at home? For the first week, actually 5 days, for the first 5 days, the parents thought these kids were going to kill them. They were nasty, they were angry, they were irritable. The teachers noticed it. It was not good. Those first 5 days. And then the fever broke and they became receptive and compliant and nice and were able to study. And the teachers noticed that they weren't causing trouble in the classroom. And the parents realized that their kids were actually nice kids. And the kids noticed it too. And they never went back. They realized that the sugar was causing all of their behavioral difficulties, their irritability, their inability to concentrate, because sugar, fructose, is a mitochondrial toxin all throughout the body, but also in the brain. And so if your mitochondria are not working, you don't feel good. And it took about 5 days for the behavioral aspects of their sugar dependence to change.
It's super interesting. So there is some, I guess, acute withdrawal symptoms from sugar, being like being irritable, maybe a little anxious, stressed, depressed, etc., right?
Exactly. You can't measure it in terms of, like sweating or cardiac, or heart rate, increase and things like that you see with withdrawal from other, mydriasis, the eye, that you see from other addictive substances.
So you would say like the best approach for somebody who's really serious about this is to just remove ultra processed foods and then eat a more wholesome or a diet comprised of whole foods. And again, it seems what I've heard you say is when you're talking about sugar, you're not talking about fruit, correct? 'Cause I think a lot of times they kind of interchange those two things, and then people are afraid of eating food that's actually good for them.
Right. So let's do the sugar and fruit story. Okay, because everyone always asks about it and say, well, you're telling me I can't eat fruit? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Here's the problem. You get a sugar bolus into your stomach and then your duodenum and then your jejunum. It gets absorbed. It goes straight to the liver. The liver can metabolize a limited amount in the same way it can metabolize a limited amount of alcohol. If you stay below that level, then the fructose didn't do any damage. But the chances are that you overexceeded your limit. For adult men, that limit is about 37 grams a day. For adult women, that's about 25 grams a day. For kids, it's about 12.5 grams a day. For toddlers, it's about 3 grams a day. And for infants, it's like 0 grams a day. Okay? So there's a limit to how fast your liver can clear the fructose. If you stay below that level, you'll be fine. Well, fruit does have fructose in it. It does. But it's at low level. It's not like, fruit is absolutely, chock smack, glommed, full of fructose. There's actually, yes, it's sweet, but it's not crazy sweet. Okay. And the fruit has the antidote packaged right alongside the sugar. It's called fiber. The fiber in the fruit forms a gel on the inside of the intestine. And what that gel does, the soluble and the insoluble fiber together form this gel. And you can actually see it on electron microscopy. It forms a secondary barrier that prevents absorption of glucose and fructose into the bloodstream. So, number one, you have a lower dose because it's fruit compared to, say, a fruit juice. And number two, the fiber in the fruit acts as a barrier that prevents absorption so that you're not overwhelming your liver. You're not causing the liver to basically give up because you've made it awash in this huge tsunami of sugar that you've exposed it to. So fruit is okay because, number one, the dose is lower and the fiber is there. And that's what makes fruit okay. Fruit juice is another story because the fiber has been removed and the sugar has been concentrated, because how many apples can you eat? But how many glasses of apple juice can you drink?
I'd love to dive more into that because in prepping for this, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was like, why is it so much easier for somebody to drink orange juice than to eat an orange? Like, I would love for you to share your thoughts on fruit juice and why or why not it's as healthy as eating fruit.
My cookbook co-author, who is a nutrition educator in the East Bay in Walnut Creek, her name is Cindy Gershon, and every year, she taught the nutrition sciences class over at Mount Diablo High School, and every year she always started with the same first experiment on the first day. Okay, so the kids are coming in. These are all, this is a Title I school with, poor kids, who probably haven't even eaten breakfast. All right. And they all come in and she takes 2 kids from the class as the experiment. And she hands one kid 6 oranges. And she says to the first kid, "Here, kid, here's 6 oranges. Make juice." So the kid squeezes the 6 oranges, gets 12.5 ounces, downs the glass and says, "Okay, what's for breakfast?" The second kid, she hands the kid 6 oranges and she says to the kid, "Here, kid, eat the 6 oranges." Kid eats orange number 1, orange number 2, orange number 3, gets to orange number 4 and throws up. She's got the vomit basin ready because it always happens on orange number 4. Okay. And the kid goes, "I'm gonna die." And then the kid doesn't eat lunch or dinner either. So what happened? The fiber happened. The fiber made the fruit self-limiting. The fiber reduced your capacity to overconsume. And the reason is because the fiber moves the food through the intestine faster to get to the end of the intestine where the satiety signal or the peptide YY hormone lives. So the food gets to the end, the peptide YY gets released into the bloodstream, goes to the brain, tells the brain, "I am satiated. I'm not going to eat another drop." The fiber makes that happen faster. So that's why the fruit is okay, because the fiber does double duty. It acts at the intestine to reduce absorption, and it also acts to reduce, at the end of the intestine, to reduce consumption.
And so when somebody drinks fruit juice instead of eating fruit,
they're not getting either of those.
It's essentially it's essentially comparable to eating some of these sugary ultra processed foods that we've been referencing and talking about throughout the conversation, right?
Ultra processed food is fiberless food, and the reason is because you can't freeze fiber. I'll prove it to you tonight. Take an orange, put it in your freezer overnight. Take it out in the morning, put it on the kitchen countertop, let it thaw, try to eat it, see what you get. You get mush. Why do you get mush? Because the ice crystals macerate the cell wall, let all the water rush in. Hey, food industry knows that. So what do? Squeeze it and freeze it. Now it lasts forever. Now it's frozen concentrated orange juice. They have taken a food, an orange, and they have turned it into a commodity. Frozen concentrated orange juice, which they can sell on the commodities exchange. Because commodity means storable food, food that won't go bad. So when you take the fiber out, the shelf life increases. Well, that's good for the food industry's profit. But that fiber was actually good for you. That was actually something you needed for your nutrition. So they basically gave you a commodity that was nutritionally depleted.
That's wild. That's wild. Like, what about some of the foods that people typically might feel are healthy, like certain cereals or even certain protein bars that have fiber in them? Like, where does the fiber come from? And do you recommend people eating those or staying away from them?
Right. So there are 2 kinds of fiber. I mentioned it before, soluble and insoluble. So soluble fibers like pectin or inulin, like what holds jelly together. Insoluble fibers, cellulose, like the stringy stuff in celery or cardboard for that matter. Okay, all that's cellulose. Now, real food has both. You need both. And the reason is because the insoluble fiber, the stringy stuff, forms a lattice work on that inside of that intestine, that gel I mentioned, okay? It has a structure, it has a lattice work, like a fishnet, if you will, okay? The soluble fiber, they're globular, they plug the holes in the fishnet. And so together, they form this secondary barrier. When the food industry takes the fiber out of the food, they take both out. They take the soluble and insoluble. Okay, so now it's fiberless food. Some companies will try to add fiber back, like Fiber One bars, okay, high fiber cereal. And what they're adding back is usually something like inulin, which is immunogenic and can cause GI distress, or psyllium, like what's in Metamucil, okay, which gels if you add water to it, And that's not necessarily setting up that gel like, we talked about, because there's no insoluble fiber. And the food industry hasn't figured out how to add insoluble fiber back to food yet. So what the food industry is doing is basically telling you, oh yeah, we put the fiber back. Yeah, we put the soluble fiber back, but we didn't put all the fiber back. We didn't put the insoluble fiber back, and therefore it's not really working like you want it to.
When I first entered the field, looking carefully at, I didn't know what Warburg had done. Working in epilepsy and mapping epilepsy genes and doing genetics, it wasn't really part of what only the fact that I heard of this guy, because he was a giant in the field of biochemistry. Everybody used Warburg apparatus in this. What happened? I went back and carefully, as a geneticist, don't forget, I'm a trained classical geneticist, so I understand genetics. And the dogma of the time was cancer was a genetic disease. And if there was any metabolic issues, it was due to the gene mutations were causing metabolic issues. But Warburg was essentially sidelined in this whole. When Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA, the whole field shifted over there to the fact that we found DNA defects in cancer cells, and genes were coding for all these different things. And there's an elegance about the discovery of DNA. And I always say biologists have a physics envy, and they've had it for centuries. Physics is the pure thought, the pure science of the human mind. Physics has always been the most egalitarian field. They have an arrogance associated with them. And all other fields, even chemistry, is not as sophisticated intellectually as is the physicist. So when biologists discovered that DNA is and it was a very coded quantitative, it became a qualitative science into a highly quantitative science. Now if some of the physicists started jumping into the biology field, because now it developed a little bit maturity and sexiness about it, and the field just massively went into this, looking for gene mutations in cancers, thinking that this was going to be the management of the disease, because once we figured out what these mutations did, we'd be able to correct them and correct the cancer. This led to the Human Genome Projects and the Cancer Genome Projects, where we mapped every single mutation in every kind of cancer. And then it was so many mutations and so much complexity, they had to bring in the IBM Watson machine that could beat guys in chess and Jeopardy, and let him try to figure out the cancer problem. And no one told Watson, the machine, that cancer was not a genetic disease. So this poor machine is burning circuits and smelling the wires are burning, and he can't figure out what's going on. And his recommendations actually put cancer patients at risk, because there are a few oncologists that recognize this information was totally an antithesis to what was best for that patient. And the absurdity of the field is you're believing this ignoramus machine that to treat patients, and even some guys say this guy can't be right. But he can analyze a billion pieces of gene sequence in like 2 seconds. But that's okay if cancer is a genetic disease. But if it's not a genetic disease, it's a complete absurdity. And that's exactly what it is. And they were paying millions and millions of dollars to rent this machine out to the Broad Institute, all these different cancer centers to figure out this stuff. And it was a complete absurdity.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Barbara O'Neill. Today, we are diving into the incredible benefits of fasting. Fasting isn't just about abstaining from food. It's a powerful practice that can positively impact both our physical health and spiritual well-being. As we age, our health needs evolve, and fasting emerges as a powerful tool to support our well-being. Imagine feeling more energized, achieving better weight management, and even enhancing cognitive function, all through a practice that has stood the test of time. So, join me as we explore the science behind fasting, uncover practical tips for incorporating it into your lifestyle, and discover how this ancient practice can unlock new levels of health and wellness for you. Fasting has been done for centuries, all through Europe, and has been well known to be a trigger to bring about healing processes in the body. So what I'd like to look at in this presentation is fasting, what it is and the effect that it has on the body. And research is coming out today that is revealing that fasting is doing far more than most people thought. So I'd like to have a look at the different types of fasting. But first of all, what is fasting? Fasting basically, in the dictionary, says absence of food. Now, food is eaten to give nourishment to every cell in our body. So what happens when we don't fast? Now, as I showed you yesterday, when we went inside the cell, here is the cell, and we have the pathways. We looked at the 20-step pathway, and this 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. This is where glucose goes down. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into the 8-step pathway. And this 8-step pathway delivers to us 36 units of energy because of the presence of oxygen. Whereas this pathway, no oxygen. So this is your glycolytic pathway, and this is the mitochondria-Krebs cycle pathway. We also looked at the fact that the body also stores glucose like little molecules, just like a little bunch of grapes really. Looks like a little bunch of grapes, but they're little molecules of glucose sitting in the muscle cell particularly, ready to be plucked when no food's coming in. And we also looked at the third place that the liver sends glucose when we eat is as the fat cells. And the fact is that we can go periods of time without eating because we've got these backups. We've got our glycogen stores already in our muscle cell. We've got our fat stores. So we can go periods without eating because there are stores in the background. So what happens when you fast? Well, one type of fasting is absence of food for a period of time. And we look in the Bible, when Israel was being challenged, often the king would go through a period of fasting, and he'd get all the people of Israel together and they would fast and pray, asking God to intervene because the enemy was too big and too great. And there are some amazing stories of how God did that. But often fasting was chosen. You see, 1,200 calories is required to digest a meal. So when you're not digesting a meal, all that blood and energy is going to other areas. And because the brain is headquarters, capital city of the human body, when you need to do some intense thinking, and I guess when Israel was in trouble and they were praying and pleading with God for wisdom, for intervention, then all their body's energies, well, the body's energies that usually go with digestion were able to go to brain function, help clear mind. You see, when they weren't eating, the body started plucking the glycogen stores and started eating up the fat stores. So fasting has been used for that, but fasting has also been used as a way of healing the body from certain diseases. You see, when you're not digesting and your brain's not going into intense brain function, the body basically says, wow, this is great. We've got a little bit of extra energy here. We can go to the areas of greatest need. And at our health retreat, our guests go through 2 days of fasting. And in those 2 days of fasting, we give them juices, because juices bypass digestion. Well, basically, I think digestion takes about 10 minutes. And what happens when you're bypassing digestion? All that blood and energy goes to areas of greatest need. It can be likened to what happens when you're on holidays at home. When I'm on holidays at home, I go to the areas of greatest need. So every day I sweep the floor, I do the dishes, I make the bed, I wash the clothes, but there are little areas in the house that I look at and I think they can wait. Maybe some papers are piling up in a corner. They can wait. They're not a priority. So when I have holidays at home, I go to those areas of greatest need. You see, the body knows what to do. It knows how to heal you. God put that amazing process inside the body. And when you're fasting, the body basically says, great, we've got a little bit of extra help now. We can go to those areas of greatest need. And as I often tell our guests at our health retreat, in every single body, the energies are going to a different area. It all depends on the greatest need. But before rest and rejuvenation can happen, the first thing the body has to do is clean house. The body's first task during fasting is to cleanse itself of toxins. It does this by breaking down damaged cells and utilizing their components for energy, a process called autophagy. This cleaning process not only clears out the debris, but also helps in the repair and regeneration of cells, leading to improved overall health. After the initial cleaning phase, the body enters a state of rejuvenation. During this phase, new cells are generated and existing cells are repaired. This leads to various health benefits such as improved immune function, better mental clarity, and increased energy levels. The liver's the project manager, and sometimes these environmental poisons come to the liver and the liver says, this is a nasty, nasty guy. Wrap him up in fat and store him. So in our fat cells, we've got these environmental poisons stored up. And then the person comes to the health retreat and they stop eating, and the fat stores are getting broken down to give the glucose that our cells need to run on, and something else a little bit more sinister is being released. It's the fat-soluble toxins. And these fat-soluble toxins that have been building up in our fat cells all our life. And what the liver does, it must break that down to a water-soluble state. That's the only way that it can be released out of the body, is as a water-soluble state. And so the liver does this in 3 stages. Let me show you. Phase 1. Phase 1 of the liver detox is where the liver takes this fat-soluble toxin, I've made a little symbol to make it a little easier, and it breaks it down to a metabolite. Metabolite simply means the first stage of metabolism or the first stage of breakdown. And this metabolite is more toxic than it originally was. It creates a lot of free radicals. This metabolite is highly volatile. And this metabolite creates a lot of free radicals, and free radicals are damaging to the tissues. And you might make the comment, what's the liver doing? It's just created something worse than it originally was. It's a process. It's like when we clean up the garage. Halfway through cleaning up the garage, it looks 100 times worse than when we started because we're pulling everything out. Basically, that's what's happening. Now, within 36 hours of going on a fast, phase 2 kicks in. And in phase 2, the liver takes this highly toxic, highly volatile metabolite and joins it together with amino acids. The union of this highly toxic, highly volatile metabolite with the amino acids, it basically joins it together like this. It locks the highly volatile metabolite with amino acids. That creates the water-soluble state. And in a water-soluble state, it can be easily released out of the body. So the symbol for the water-soluble state is a wave in a box. Phase 3 happens in conjunction with phase 2. And phase 3 is where the liver takes this water-soluble state and basically releases it out via your sweat glands, releases it out via your urine, releases it out via your colon. You see, it is now a water-soluble state and it can be easily released out. This is what science is showing now happens when people fast. During a fast, this detoxification process allows the body to rid itself of accumulated toxins effectively. Phase 3 ensures that the converted water-soluble toxins are expelled through various excretory pathways, such as sweat, urine, and feces. This comprehensive detox mechanism underscores the liver's critical role in maintaining our body's internal environment. By converting fat-soluble toxins to a water-soluble state, the liver ensures that harmful substances are efficiently processed and eliminated. This not only helps in clearing out toxins, but also supports overall cellular health. During fasting, the liver's workload increases, but it simultaneously enhances the body's ability to cleanse itself. Now, your liver has certain needs at these stages. So the needs that the liver has at stage 2 is antioxidants. You see, this metabolite is very toxic and has the ability to damage us. Well, that's what the free radicals do. Whereas the antioxidants, their nickname is free radical scavengers. They mop them all up. So the most potent antioxidants are beta-carotenes. This is why when you fast today, you must have juices. And the most potent beta-carotenes is found in your orange-coloured vegetables and your green-coloured vegetables. So at our health retreats, we give mostly carrot, celery and apple juices. That's 80% carrot, 10% celery, 10% apple. And our celery is dark green because it's come out of my garden. So that carrot, celery and apple juice, very high in beta-carotenes to mop up or to help mop up these nasty metabolites while the amino acids come in and join with them to make this safe water-soluble state. Another antioxidant is vitamin C. Vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is only part of vitamin C. Ascorbic acid is like the envelope that's holding all the other nutrients that makes up vitamin C. Have you ever got an envelope in the mail and opened it and it's empty? That's ascorbic acid. You might have heard of Dr. Linnaeus Pauling. He got two Nobel Prizes for his work on vitamin C. It was not on ascorbic acid, it was on the whole C. And the whole C is what you'll find in your fruits and your vegetables. So if you do buy a vitamin C, make sure it has ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids. The bioflavonoids come with the ascorbic acid to make the whole C. Another potent antioxidant is vitamin E. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin, so you'll find vitamin E in nuts, seeds, grains, legumes. What's also required at phase 2 is minerals. And minerals are found in that little bit of Celtic salt before every glass of water. Using organically grown fruits and vegetables for the juices is providing the minerals. And with our guests, we give a steam bath every afternoon. At 6 o'clock, they have broth. And broth is a lot of vegetables cooked in a lot of waters for many hours and then strained. So all the minerals out of the vegetables have gone into the water. We even put stinging nettle in our broth. Then it's strained out. The good news is you don't have to eat it. You just get the minerals outed in the water. And then we put some Celtic salt in. So we give our guests every evening a broth, which is very high in minerals. Also vitamin B. Vitamin B is required. On our detox program, we always give our guests a vitamin B supplement 3 times a day. What we aim to do is nutritionally support every cell in the body. We aim to nutritionally support the liver to be able to effectively detoxify you, to be able to mop up these nasty metabolites and get them out of your body. Well, what's the needs in phase 3? Because amino acids are required. This is phase 1. Now we're looking at the needs of phase 2. So the needs of phase 2 are protein. Protein is required to supply the amino acids to mop up the nasty metabolites. So when we are running a detox program at our health retreats, we always serve a protein powder, especially day 2, because notice what I said, within 36 hours, phase 2 is kicking in. So definitely by the 2nd day, protein is needed. We use a pea protein, and it's a pre-digested protein, so it's very easily digested. In fact, probably again in about 10 minutes, the digestion of the protein drink has been done. So on phase 2, when phase 2 is happening, which is day 2 of a fast, we supply 3 protein drinks. So that's 8 o'clock in the morning and 12 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. On our detox days, we give 5 juices, 8, 10, 12, 2 and 4. And so on the 2nd day, it's every 2nd juice gets the protein, and all other juices we serve a green barley, which is very high in the beta-carotenes. What does phase 3 need? Phase 3 needs fats. What fats do is they keep the cell nice and supple and allow the process to happen. Fats are essential during phase 3 because they ensure cell membranes remain flexible and functional. This flexibility is crucial for the cells to absorb nutrients and expel toxins efficiently. The types of fats we recommend include healthy fats from sources like avocados, nuts, seeds, and olive oil. These fats not only support cellular health, but also provide a sustained energy source, which is particularly important during a detox program. And my suggestion is try a fast 1 day or 2 days a week. It will stimulate brain-derived neurotrophic factor, causing new brain cells to be developed, no matter what the age. But there are some requirements. Let's have a look at the requirements for the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a fast. So this can be 1 day or 2 days, or it can be another type of fast that Ellen White defines in the Ministry of Healing, and that is having 2 meals a day. For myself, I have breakfast at 7 o'clock, like a king. I have lunch at usually about 1:30, like a queen. And often I do not eat again till breakfast the next day. That's an 18-hour fast. And that is such an easy fast because when we would be the most hungriest, we are asleep. And your stomach's very happy because it gets to sleep when you're sleeping. So the fast can be 1 day, or the fast can be 2 days, or the fast can be the 18-hour fast done every 24 hours. That's a very easy way to do it. And the only way you can go the distance is to have high fiber, and all your plants are high in fiber. Generous amounts of protein. I myself eat legumes every meal. For lunch yesterday, I think they were cannelloni beans. We had squash and carrots baked. We had a big salad. We had some dressings with that. Oh, and we had steamed broccoli. You see, that meal, everything had fibre, generous amounts of protein, and for dessert, we had some walnuts. So legumes and nuts. Be careful not to overdo the nuts. And seeds, oh, that's what I also had, pumpkin seeds. And then healthy fats. What are your healthy fats? Your healthy fats are the fats that have not been altered. The most dangerous fats are the heating of the polyunsaturated fats, the margarines, they're the altered fats. We need to be having oil in its raw state. The only oil that can bear heat is coconut oil because it has no empty spots for the heat and the light to be attracted into. It's a saturated fat. So your healthy fats are your nuts and your seeds and your coconut and your olive. These healthy fats are essential for brain health and overall well-being. Incorporating them into your diet helps maintain proper cellular function and supports cognitive function. In addition to the nuts, seeds, coconut and olive oil, avocados and fatty fish like salmon and mackerel are also excellent sources of healthy fats. It's important to avoid trans fats and highly processed oils as they can contribute to inflammation and other health issues. Instead, focus on whole, unprocessed foods to get the most nutritional benefits. What also causes a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor is full hydration. The brain cannot function if it's dehydrated. Our brain is a hydroelectric system, so no hydro, and that's water, no electricity. So full hydration. How does full hydration happen? At least 8 glasses of water throughout the day with that little bit of Celtic salt with every glass. And what that does, that Celtic salt with its 3 magnesium, it causes the water to be pulled inside the cell. What also causes a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor is early nights. What totally blocks a release of the brain-derived neurotrophic factor is eyes. You see, your eyes are an extension of your brain, is eye exposure to technology. And do you remember those hours? That computer, that television has to be switched off before 9. But it's a documentary that you've been waiting to see for a while. Well, because of iView, because of recording, you don't have to watch it at that time. 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. I went to a lecture by Dr. Agatha Thrash. She's passed now, but she did a mighty work. And someone asked her the question, how often can you afford a late night? She said, oh, about once every 2 years. Got that? Once every 2 years. You almost can't make up for those late nights. So to cause a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, make sure you're going to bed early. Number 6, sunshine. Your brain needs sunshine, and it gets sunshine through your eyes. So every day, ideally, it's a bit hard in Vancouver at the moment because we've got a lot of rain, but we did have a little bit of sunshine yesterday. As I do this list, have you noticed I'm actually going over the 8 laws of health, and that brings us to another one, and that is things that can inhibit the release is caffeine. The reason why sugar inhibits the release is because it overloads the brain with fuel, alcohol. Also drugs, and the drugs specifically that I'm referring to are the mind-altering drugs, whether they be legal or illegal. And tobacco. Tobacco robs the brain of oxygen. So for various reasons and in various ways, all of these substances inhibit the body's ability to release brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Notice in this cell, now this cell here is in every brain cell, these energy cycles. Notice how much energy we're getting with oxygen compared to a cell that doesn't get the oxygen, very little energy. And so that's where pure air comes into it. If a person's smoking cigarettes, they've got a huge reduction in oxygen going to the cell. And if a person is breathing in moldy air, chemical air, stale air, bad air, it inhibits the brain working properly because we're only getting this much energy instead of that much energy. Thank you for joining me today as we explored the incredible benefits of fasting, especially tailored for older adults. Fasting isn't just about skipping meals. It's a powerful tool that can rejuvenate your body and mind, supporting better health and vitality as we age. I hope you found these insights valuable and inspiring. Remember, integrating fasting into your lifestyle should always be done safely and with consideration for your individual health needs. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who may benefit. Stay tuned for more empowering content on health and well-being. Until next time, take care and stay healthy.
Can you explain quickly seed oils? Because Dr. Kate Shanahan, she came on the show. They are the Hateful Eight: canola, soybean, corn, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, red bran, and cottonseed oils. Good oils would include avocado, coconut, what else?
Olive oil, coconut, avocado,
olive.
and then things like ghee and beef tallow, duck fat, things like that. Things that are much more natural and have been less refined. These are fats that our bodies have evolved to eat over millennia. The issue with seed oils, which is one of the most controversial topics right now in the world, for whether they're healthy or not, I think you've got to back up a little bit and realize a couple things. One, that this is now the predominant source of calories in the American diet is these seed oils that are in everything. They are in every processed food. They're in salad
so hard
dressings,
to find food without
marinades.
them.
You can barely go to Whole Foods and find a food without seed oils anymore.
I was complaining last Friday. I had on Dr. Martin McCary, and I was saying, okay, we want to get nuts, just healthy nuts for the kids to snack on, right? So you go, good luck finding a nut. The only ones you can find is maybe pistachios and macadamia nuts that haven't been treated with canola oil. And the kids, they don't want the raw nuts. They want something that's been like a little like flavored. But I have been able to find macadamia nuts and pistachios that say ingredients: nuts and salt. That's it. But everything else, canola.
Always. And it's devastating to see like what's even happened to Whole Foods. You know, the integrity and the standards of what they used to consider healthy have slipped so much, where 9 of the 10 things I pick up at a Whole Foods these days have too much sugar, seed oils, or they're not organic. So it's unfortunate. But so these seed oils have burst onto the scene, and many of them were actually created in the wake of Rockefeller's work with oil refining, as essentially they needed something to do with some of the byproducts of the oil refining. And so in a sense, we're kind of eating like an engine lubricant when we eat these seed oils. And they are not foods that we had 150, 200 years ago. They're brand new, and they're highly concentrated and rich for omega-6 fats, which are pro-inflammatory. They get incorporated rapidly into our cell membranes and have an impact on how our cells function. They outcompete other healthier forms of fat for places in our cell membrane. So they're actually changing really the structural integrity of our body. And I think, we have to take into account the fact that these are generally stored in clear plastic bottles, that plastic can, anything that's stored in a thin plastic bottle, like a vegetable oil or canola oil, can have those microplastics leaching into it. You often see avocado oil or olive oil in a glass bottle, but these seed oils are almost always in a plastic bottle. Clear plastic bottles, so that light is getting in, it's oxidizing the oils, that can make them more damaging. And they're just the majority of fats we're eating, and they're devoid of really any nutritional value. I think if you really want to lose your lunch, you should Google a video of how canola oil is made. How is olive oil or avocado?
We did it because I heard you say that. And so we have at least one. Here is a little look at how they make the very natural canola oil. Watch.
It's the flakes into a screw press.
It has a large revolving screw-shaped shaft enclosed within a slotted cage. As the shaft turns, its threads squeeze the flakes with high pressure, forcing out the oil, which then drains out through the slots. A 70-minute wash with a solvent. This chemical extraction process removes all but a trace of oil. So the next step is to cool the oil to 5 degrees Celsius. This thickens those waxes so they can be filtered out. The waxes don't go to waste either.
Gross.
The factory uses them
Listening
to produce
audience, you've got
vegetable
to go to
shortening.
youtube.com and
After
watch this.
washing and filtering the oil, they bleach it to lighten the color. Then use a steam injection heating process to remove the canola odor. The oil is now fully refined and ready for bottling.
For the listening audience, it looks like they put that through a car engine. That's really what it reminded me of. Putting it through a car engine and then feeding it to you.
I don't want that in my body. You know, and then on top of that, you do have to think about the bigger picture environmental impact, because these are, again, taxpayer-funded commodity crops that are covered in glyphosate and pesticides, which are hormone disruptors. And so you're essentially, by buying that oil and using it, we're also promoting a system that's driving this monoculture that's destroying the soil in our country and will probably lead to some type of food collapse in the future because of what we're doing to our soil. And so much of that land is being used to grow this stuff that's just going into seed oils. It takes like I'm just
having my aha moment here on how kids are going into early puberty and the sperm count is going down and girls are having PCOS more than ever. Even if you have a household that's feeding them vegetables and fruits, unless you're eliminating seed oils, they're getting the pesticides that you just listed, that glucosidase, whatever it is. That way, they're coming in through what's in your pantry. And this stuff could be leading to a lot of that, no?
There's three things that we really need to be thinking about when we're talking about hormone disruption that is rampant right now. Like you said, I mean, a devastating statistic is that early onset puberty is now becoming like epidemic in our country. American girls are starting puberty years earlier than any other continent in the world. And it has declined about 6 years, the onset of puberty in the past 100 years. And we're also seeing a huge rise in hormone-driven cancers, like breast cancer, which is an estrogen-driven cancer. On top of that, we're seeing a sustained decline in sperm count and a sustained decline in total fertility rate, and women's infertility, the leading cause of which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, is skyrocketing. So across the hormonal spectrum, we are being destroyed and devastated. I mean, I'm 36 years old. I cannot have a conversation with friends in my age group without the topic of infertility or IVF or egg freezing coming up. So we have to back up and say, what the hell is going on? Two of the big factors I think we need to be investigating are both pesticides and plastics. So, plastic is everywhere. Plastic is ubiquitous. It's literally in every single thing. Our sheets are made of polyester. Our clothes are made of polyester. Every bottle in our home is made of plastic. All our food containers are plastic. Plastics are now in our air, nanoparticularized plastics in our air. It's in our water supply. It's on our food. It's in our homes. We're covered in it. And plastics and pesticides can disrupt estrogen receptor signaling, act as xenoestrogens, which essentially create a pro-estrogenic environment in our bodies. And other pesticides like atrazine, which is illegal overseas, but which we use about 70 million pounds of in our country each year, can actually convert testosterone to estrogen. And so, just as a real wake-up call to people, we talk about, does organic matter? It's like these chemicals that are invisible and are on our food can convert testosterone to estrogen. So why would we not be worried about that when all of these hormone-related issues are skyrocketing in our culture? So one of the easiest things that I think we can do to clean things up is to just, we got to filter our water. We should avoid pesticides on our foods, and we should really try and minimize the amount of plastic that's in our homes and on our foods and things like that.
Everyone.
Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about what would happen to your body if you quit sugar for just 7 days. And for one thing, you'll probably notice improved energy. And why is that? Because sugar is a very unstable energy source. And the thing that determines how you feel and what kind of energy you have is called your brain. And the thing about the brain is that it never rests. Most of your body cells, they have kind of a circadian rhythm where they're very, very active and very, very inactive. But the brain doesn't do that. And therefore, the brain needs stable energy. And how stable? Well, the brain is about 2% of your body weight and it uses 20% of all your energy. So it's about 10 times more metabolically active than your average body part. And the baseline, the average energy consumption of the brain in the typical person is about 20 watts. So it's like a dim light bulb, if you will. And if we look at that graphically for comparison, that would be about that size of a bar. And then if we compare to the absolute most active that your brain would ever be, it only goes up by less than 5%. So graphically, we can see that it's just barely, it's almost indistinguishable from the baseline level. And when you're sleeping, the very, very lowest that your brain ever slows down is about 18 watts. So you can see here how the brain activity, the brain energy consumption, which again determines how you feel, it almost doesn't fluctuate at all. And when you're awake would be the green and the red bar here, that where you really see no difference. So if we compare to a muscle, for example, that could be 100 times more active, or 1,000, I don't have the numbers, but you get the idea, when it's active as opposed to when it's at rest. Whereas the brain is a very unique organ in that its energy demands fluctuate very, very little. And the brain is what determines how you feel and what sort of energy you have to do different things. And that's why the brain needs super stable energy. So if we use the analogy of putting a log on the fire, something that burns very steady and for a long, long time, the way the body works is that the brain likes to have a very, very stable energy level in a very narrow range. And if you eat sugar or you eat something processed, some processed starch like white flour, your blood sugar is going to leave this ideal range and it's going to go super high. And when it goes super high, the body has to bring it down very, very quickly. So it comes crashing down. And sometimes the body is pretty well tuned and it can make it level off in this narrow range. But for most people, especially if you abuse the system over time, then it's going to start crashing and it might go well below this level. And this is where you feel horrible, you have no energy, you get cravings, and your body just doesn't work and your brain doesn't work. Whereas if instead we eat the equivalent of the log on the fire, which would be fat and protein and fiber and non-starchy vegetables, now you can eat as much food as you like and it is not going to leave this ideal range unless possibly if you have already sort of destroyed the system and really messed up that carbohydrate handling machine. So in order to feel good and have energy, your brain needs this stable and ongoing energy like this green line. So therefore, you need to cut out, you need to stop or dramatically reduce sugar and starches. And then, like I mentioned, to get this log on the fire, what you want to do is increase fat, protein, and fiber. And if you understand what I just talked about, then you also understand this is why humans are not made, we're not designed for diets that are very high in sugar and refined starch and processed foods, which is most of what people eat today. And it is why we run much, much better on fat. There are basically two sources of energy for the body. There are two fuels. One is fat and one is carbohydrates. And the carbohydrate will create this kind of behavior, this kind of blood sugar spikes, and it will do it more the more processed it is. Whereas the log on the fire, the whole foods with some fat and protein, are going to exhibit this behavior. And you can start moving from blood sugar spikes to a more level energy supply very, very quickly. In a matter of days, you will start noticing this if you're strict with it. And you can do this if you stop the sugar, but especially if you also at the same time start to cut back on your carbohydrates overall, and you start eating more whole food that have a lower glycemic index, and you also cut out what we call white trash, which is the white and processed sugar, flour, and oils. So the carbs, the processed foods, the high glycemic food is all going to create these type of spikes. And if you cut back on those and eat real food, then you're going to get this energy supply instead. And if you improve that brain energy, obviously you can also get better mental clarity. And something that a lot of people complain about, which is brain fog, can actually lift and start improving very, very quickly. And I want you to imagine the effects over time if you all of a sudden can start thinking more clearly, if you have better focus, if you have better productivity, you get more done when you do things, and if you can make better decisions. Just imagine if each one of these gets just a few percent better, then the compounding effect of thinking better, focusing better, and making better decisions over time. That can be truly life-changing. Next thing you notice might be less bloating. And this is another thing that maybe the majority of people are complaining about these days. It's like, who doesn't have bloating, right? So sugar feeds the bad gut bacteria. And the bad gut bacteria, they're the ones who make the gas, especially the kind of gas that makes people want to leave the room. And these are what we're calling pathogenic species. They're the bad bacteria. They're the ones that have grown out of proportion, that are out of balance with your beneficial bacteria. And most people who have severe bloating probably have something called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Because where you get that bloating, that gas expansion soon after a meal, is because you're feeding the bacteria in the small intestine a buffet of sugar and carbohydrates and even healthy things like fiber, but these bacteria are in the wrong place. They're not supposed to be in the small intestine. They're supposed to be further down in the large intestine. And you're supposed to have absorbed all the food and all the carbohydrates in the small intestine before it gets down to the large intestine. And if you absorb it before it ever gets to the bacteria, now that's where you don't get all the bloating. But once you have a condition like SIBO, once you have an imbalance of these bacteria, now there are also other carbohydrates that can create problems and feed these bacteria. So even things like fiber, which is a type of carbohydrate that we normally can't digest, but we do have some bacteria in the large intestine that are normally digesting these, or starch, which we want to avoid for the most part, but there are some things that, like a sweet potato or tubers, that have some starch in them. And again, if we absorb that stuff before it gets to the bacteria, now we're in good shape. And there's also another group of things called FODMAP, which stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And polyols ends with OLS, and that means that there's all of these sugar alcohols that are popular to add now as sugar substitutes that most people can tolerate a tiny little bit, but if you start eating them regularly and you have a touch of SIBO, now they can make it a whole lot worse. So this is not a super easy problem, and there's a lot of different factors that can cause bloating. But one thing for sure is that sugar is a safe bet to stop. Sugar is never going to make anything better. The fourth thing that you will probably notice is that you will start sleeping better. And the reason is that sugar will cause blood sugar swings. Whenever you eat sugar, you will have spikes and sharp drops. And what that causes is it causes disruptions in cortisol. Because whenever your blood sugar goes up and it comes crashing down, when it's on the low side, now your body starts making cortisol because your blood sugar is coming down so fast that your body tries to compensate with increased cortisol. And the primary reason for releasing cortisol is to try to raise blood sugar again. So in a nutshell, eating sugar and processed carbs will disrupt your cortisol function. And what happens now is that there's this hormone called melatonin. And this is your sleep hormone. This is the hormone that regulates your sleep cycle, your circadian rhythm, and that is the hormone that puts you to sleep. So with plenty of well-regulated melatonin, now you can sleep like a baby. But if you eat a bunch of sugar and it starts dysregulating the cortisol, now this cortisol is going to very effectively shut down that melatonin. And that makes sense, right? Because melatonin puts you to sleep. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And if you have stress, if you have danger, if you have an emergency, obviously that's not the time that you want to sleep. So this is one of these mechanisms in the body where cortisol kind of overrides a lot of things because stress is about survival. So now obviously if you dysregulate cortisol, now you're also going to shut down sleep. Benefit number 5 of stopping sugar is that you will be on your way to weight loss. Now, in a couple of days, not a whole lot's going to happen, but you're going to start a cascade of effects. So the main thing is that sugar is a drug. It is very, very highly addictive. It stimulates pleasure centers in the brain, and it's like an opiate, basically. And humans, like all other animals, have a very sophisticated regulation of our need for food. We get hungry when we need food. And this is very balanced and very sophisticated. But when we take a drug like sugar, sugar bypasses this normal regulation. So we don't have that fine-tuned mechanism in place anymore. And this is one of the strongest factors that causes overeating. So where you're going to see the first few pounds go away is if you also stop the other carbohydrates that you're eating, because now you're going to start burning through some of your glycogen stores. That's the way your body stores some carbohydrate in the body. And if you cut back on sugar and carbs, you start reducing those glycogen stores, and the glycogen binds water. So when you reduce your glycogen, now you also get rid of water. And that's the first few pounds that you lose is actually just water weight loss. But like I said, what's more important is that you change the behavior in your body and that you start getting your normal hunger regulation back. Because there's no way that's going to work when you eat a drug like sugar. And you know this to be true because it doesn't matter how much food you have eaten. You've had this huge steak, you've had the baked potato, you've had all the food you can eat, but afterwards you can still fit in a little bit of dessert and a little bit of sugar. And another mechanism that's also super important, I've just touched on it quickly here because I've done so many videos on it. It's about insulin resistance, that sugar is the absolute worst thing that creates insulin resistance because sugar is like alcohol. It can only be processed, only be broken down by the liver, and the liver is your metabolic hub. So by eating sugar, it's like drinking a bunch of alcohol. You get a fatty liver, and a fatty liver becomes insulin resistant. And it's one of the primary mechanisms that you have to break if you want to get out of insulin resistance and a fatty liver. The next thing you notice is that you get way fewer cravings. And one aspect of this is what we just talked about, that you bypass that drug behavior, get back to normal regulation. But the other mechanism, the other factor of insulin resistance is that when you're insulin resistant, means you have too much insulin floating around in your body on average, that insulin is fat storing. There is no way to burn fat when your insulin is super high. Your body just won't do it. And if you can't burn the fat, you store all this energy for a rainy day or a day without food, but with high insulin, you can't get it back. There's no way to retrieve all this energy. So what happens now? Instead, you get hungry and you get cravings. And one more wonderful way that you fix cravings is that when you cut out the sugar, now your taste buds recalibrate. It's like you get completely new taste buds. You start discovering what food is supposed to taste like. And real food, like vegetables and avocado and tomatoes and meat, starts tasting absolutely amazing. And now what happens, instead of cravings, when you go without food for a while, you get something wonderful called real hunger. Your body is letting you know it has a desire for some true resources, not the processed garbage, but it really wants real food. It wants the meat, fish, chicken, it wants the leafy greens, it wants the non-starchy vegetables, it wants nuts and seeds, and all those good things that we can find on the planet that we haven't processed and destroyed. And what you find when you switch from sugar and processed foods to real food is that it's infinitely more satisfying. It feels so good to eat that wonderful, well-cooked gourmet food. And now, because it's so much more satisfying, you will find you eat fewer meals. You can go much longer between meals. The seventh benefit of cutting out sugar is that you will probably get clearer skin. You probably get better skin. And this is because sugar is inflammatory for one thing, and inflammation drives a lot of different skin diseases. But also, sugar feeds everything evil in your body. Everything that doesn't belong, everything that's opportunistic and taking advantage of you feeds on sugar. So things like bacteria and virus, yeast and fungus. The virus is more indirectly, it's feeding off your metabolic processes, but it still benefits from having a high sugar consumption when you eat a lot of sugar. But bacteria, yeast, and fungus, they feed directly off the sugar. And most people don't realize that the ill effects of these pathogens, it's not the fact that they just exist in your body, it's that they have metabolic byproducts. They have toxic metabolic byproducts. Their waste is what you're reacting to. And if these pathogens spew out a lot of waste in your body, now that puts a strain on your elimination organs. You only have so much capacity to detoxify and get stuff out of your body. And most people don't realize what those elimination organs are. So it's the liver, it's the bowel or the large intestine, it's your kidney. But then what people don't realize are the last two, that your lungs and your skin are two of your largest elimination organs. So the more that your body gets bogged down, the more it's going to try to find a way to get rid of these toxins through other channels. And the skin is one of those ways. So by stopping the sugar, you're helping your body get cleaner in all sorts of ways. Benefit number 8 of cutting out sugar is reduced joint pain. And again, this is because sugar is inflammatory. So a lot of chronic pain that people have to do with back pain, hip pain, neck pain, but also knee and shoulder pain and hand and foot pain. People have trouble gripping things. And the extreme version of this is called rheumatoid arthritis, and it's an autoimmune disease. But arthritis simply means joint inflammation. And the other type that is not always considered inflammatory is called osteoarthritis. And it is absolutely inflammatory also. It's just not as inflammatory as the rheumatoid. And most of the time when we're talking about these things, we're talking about osteoarthritis, which is due to a chronic low-grade inflammation. And when you can cut out the sugar short-term and you can reduce your insulin resistance and your chronic inflammation long-term. Now, so many people, if you look through the comments on a lot of my videos, you will start seeing that people report these things going away. Not only are they getting off their blood pressure medication and all these different things that they don't need anymore, but things they had no idea would get better, like joint pain, also go away. Number 9 is that you probably find that you'll be in a better mood. And this could be just if your mood is shifting a little bit, or it could be more severe depression or anxiety as well. So there are these different neurotransmitters in the body. Those are brain chemicals the brain uses to communicate in your nervous system and send signals and regulate things. So we have dopamine, we have serotonin, we have GABA or gamma aminobutyric acid, and we have glutamate. So there are many of them, but these are the 4 main ones. And it's way more complex than this, but dopamine is associated with reward seeking and motivation. Serotonin is associated with mood regulation. GABA has to do with inhibitory function, slowing things down, shutting things off. So relaxation has a lot to do with GABA. And glutamate is the excitatory. It's the opposite of inhibitory, and that has to do with learning and being active and going after things. So as you probably understand, because all of these are natural and made by the body, there's not like a good and a bad thing. They're supposed to exist in balance so that the brain can trigger them at the appropriate time for the appropriate circumstance. But now, if you eat a bunch of sugar, now the sugar can stimulate some of these. It can shut others down. It can create a dependency. It can make it so that we produce more, but then we also start depending and craving more and more. So it's like sugar stimulates a certain thing, so then we just want more and more sugar to get that feeling going. And sugar can also desensitize, it can disrupt and unbalance all of these different neurotransmitters. So we have this wonderful natural system that calibrates itself and balances itself all the time. And now we throw sugar into the balance that can mess with it. I don't have to tell you that it can start affecting your mood. And benefit number 10 is what this channel is a lot about, because diabetes and insulin resistance is the #1 health problem in the world. It is associated with the majority of health problems, the majority of chronic diseases, and the majority of things that kill people. So by cutting out the sugar, you will start improving your blood sugar control almost immediately. You will start lowering your insulin levels, and you will start improving blood pressure possibly. And all of these things can start happening within days. It'll probably take a while, like weeks to months, to start getting lasting benefits. But just the fact that you can start making changes in days to where you can notice things is pretty amazing. So now here's my challenge. What if you just decide to cut out the sugar? And a lot of people get intimidated when you talk about doing it forever or doing it for a month. It's like they've never done anything consistently for that long. So that's why I'm suggesting let's just do it for 7 days. And don't even feel the burden of the 7 days. Just make a decision to start. And then you just take 1 day at a time. And if you can do 1 day, then just wake up tomorrow and see if you can do it again. And while you're feeling like you're on a little bit of a roll from that euphoria of that decision, now try to stay positive and ask yourself honestly, how am I feeling? How do you feel? And you will probably notice that a lot of the things that I started talking about are already better. Even within a day, some of those cravings and those taste buds and these small changes are starting to happen. And next you ask yourself, do you really miss it? Now that you're feeling good and you can at least maintain the idea of real whole food, of juicy, nice food, do you really miss it? And if all is still good and well, let's just do 1 more day. And if you start tacking on the days one by one, now before you know it, all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're feeling absolutely amazing. And you've lost all the weight and you've experienced most of the things that I've talked about. And now you're ready to add that nice comment, that testimonial that you can read hundreds of thousands on all of my videos of people who have changed their lives. They are feeling better, they've lost the weight, but more importantly, they can do things that they could never do before. They go to their doctors and the doctor says, I don't know what you did, but you don't need these medications any longer. Or maybe you have one of those doctors who say that everything looks fantastic, I don't care what you did, you really don't need these medications, but let's just keep taking them anyway. And that's when it may be time for you to start looking for another doctor that can support your health journey based on your goals. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.
I don't know why everybody's asking me, what can I do to lower glutamine? You cannot lower glutamine with a diet. Okay? Can you tell me that? Can you report that back? Why people ask me, what do I need to? Hundreds of people, how do I lower glutamine? You need a drug. You need drugs to do that. And you have to strategically use the drugs. So you can lower glucose with diet. You cannot lower glutamine to the point to kill tumor cells with a diet. You cannot lower glutamine to kill tumor cells by diet. You need a drug, and that drug has to be pulsed. It cannot be chronically given because we need the glutamine for our immune system. We need the glutamine for the health of our gut. We need the glutamine for urea cycles. We need the glutamine. It's essential. But if we are too aggressive on glutamine, then we destroy our gut, prevent our immune system from functioning, and because our immune cells also need glutamine. So this is the press pulse therapeutic strategy for managing cancer. The paper is on open access. Anybody who wants to read the paper, please read the paper. The answers to your questions will be in the paper. Please read the paper. People say, oh, the cancer cells can use ketone. No, they can't. Show me the evidence of tumor cells using ketones in the absence of glucose and glutamine. I have never found it. Nobody's shown this yet. We interrogate these tumor cells. So people keep asking me, what diet? Well, he didn't say what to eat. Your job is to lower your glucose ketone index. And people say, well, how do I do that? You determine that. Some person can eat vegan. Some people can eat carnivore, some pescatarian, some Mediterranean. I don't know. Eat whatever you want to eat and see what it does to your GKI, glucose ketone index. And people say, well, I tried doing this. Well, don't eat anything. Just drink water and see if it goes down. Well, I don't know if I can do that. Well, then don't do that. Do whatever the hell you want to do. All I'm saying is you want to kill cancer cells, it's on your shoulders, right? Now, you can always choose to take radiation and chemo. I mean, we're not stopping you from doing that. I'm never saying anybody. I will never tell anybody, don't do a toxic poison or radiation. If that's what they would like to do, that's their prerogative to do that. But I'm saying that we can get we can get a handle on the growth of the tumor by just simply depriving it of the two fuels needed for driving the dysregulated cell growth. And those two fuels are replacing the energy that would get from oxidative phosphorylation using oxygen. Tumor cells take in oxygen, but they're not using it for energy. They're producing reactive oxygen species, ROS, which are causing the mutations in the nucleus. And damaging other parts. So tumor cells cannot use oxygen effectively to generate enough energy to drive dysregulated cell growth. They need fermentation. The fermentation is coming from substrate level phosphorylation in the cytoplasm with glucose as the fuel, and mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation in the mitochondria with glutamine as the fuel through the glutaminolysis pathway or the glycolysis pathway. So lowering glucose restricts the availability of energy through the cytoplasmic glycolysis pathway. Lowering glutamine specifically, just on off, pulse. Hit off. How long should we go off? We're working on that. Just do a little bit here with the drug, the oxynorlucine, or maybe some parasite medications, which seem to target glutamine. And then we take it off. God forbid we hurt the patient. We want no toxicity associated with the elimination of these tumor cells. or tumor. We want the person to get gradually more and more healthy the longer we use press pulse metabolic therapy. So improved health, no hair loss, no gum bleeding, no diarrhea, no fatigue, no nausea, none of the stuff. You want the tumor to be strategically destroyed slowly while the rest of the body gets healthier and healthier by transitioning from glucose to ketones, and the energetic efficiency of the mitochondria in the normal cells will be significantly improved. Based on the Drenick study and based on these other studies that unfortunately so many people don't read or don't know about, and read our press pulse therapeutic strategy. That has the framework to do this. And then, well, it didn't go through the details. The paper that Dr. Durai, with our other 20 or so authors, has just come out putting flesh on the framework. That paper was just published for glioblastoma, but the same strategy would be effective for the majority of cancers. They're all very similar. They all can't. They're dependent on glucose and glutamine for fuel. They can't switch to other things. So lung cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, they're all the same. Very similar. I don't want to say the exact same. They're all very, very similar and having a dependency on a fermentation rather than an oxidative phosphorylation. So this strategy that I've just mentioned should be quite effective. And when we see people who actually do it, not all of them, you're not going to get somebody who has in hospice with 3 days to live. When you're first diagnosed with cancer, you have a lot of many people already they're in pretty good shape. This is when we can push this down. And then, of course, if we do have some surviving cancer cells, despite what I've just said, then a small low dose of chemo or a small spot shot of radiation might finish off the few surviving tumor cells. Maybe a shot of immunotherapy, a Keytruda, Opdivo, CAR-T, doesn't make any difference. You're fighting now a very small number of cells that are just barely hanging on for survival. And now you can come in with a part of the standard of care and finish them off. But the issue, of course, is we can take that angry, malignant tumor and bring it down into a less angry, less malignant growth, and then gradually hammer away at it. And in the end, we can either surgically debulk it, or we can hit it off with some small dose of chemo. You don't have to have your hair falling out and bleeding and all that crazy stuff. I mean, if you know strategic. Now, the problem, what I'm talking about, is unfortunately not understood, or by the majority of people in the oncology field. They haven't been trained to know that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disorder and not a genetic disorder. Once you realize that, then what I'm talking about is based on hard science, replicable results, and understanding the biochemistry and biology of the tumor and how that differs from the biology and biochemistry of the normal cells in the body.
What I'd like to do is I have some things in this file I want to close up with, so I want to talk about them now. I tried to look at the American Cancer Society statistics page, and actually I found it just quite confusing. And I'll read what it said. It says that the country's cancer mortality rate fell by 33% from 1991 through 2021. That decrease equates to an estimated 4.1 million fewer cancer deaths, while researchers attribute to improvements in disease management and detection, along with reductions in smoking. I don't know. I find that whole sentence to be highly confusing. And it goes on to say, yet the research also warns that increases in some cancers threaten this progress. The report indicates the incident rate for female breast cancer, for example, has risen by about 0.6 per year since the mid-2000s. I don't know. It says, we're encouraged by the steady drop in cancer mortality as a result of less smoking, earlier detection for some cancers, and improved treatment. I don't know. I found it says, but as a nation, we've dropped the ball on cancer prevention as incidence continues to increase for more common cancers like breast, prostate, and endometrial, such as colorectal and cervical cancers in some young adults. The American Cancer Society also says the trend in cancer patients skewing older is beginning to change. So it's getting much younger people. The shift toward more middle-aged patients, likely in part, reflects steep decreases in incidence of prostate and smoke. I don't know. This whole thing just gets confusing. But anyway, but then what they do is they say they call for an increased screening uptake among people 45 to 49 years old and among those with a family history of the disease. This history of the family always gets rather confusing. Also, there's racial disparities additionally present barriers to progress. From 2016 to 2020, cancer incidents were highest among Black men. No surprise there, right? With a rate of 533 per 100,000 population. That was 79% higher than the rate for Asian American men, who had the lowest rate among group study. The report found the high incidence among Black men was largely driven by their extraordinary burden of prostate cancer and with rates 68% higher than white men, 2 times higher than American Indian and Alaskan Native and Hispanic men, and 3 times higher than Asian American and Pacific Islander men. So they say it's a result from structural racism, inequalities in wealth, I don't know. I've talked in the past about this kind of cancer, and I think there's a high racial component. I think it would be very easy to tell a Black man, hey, you got cancer, we're going to chop off your testicles, right? I think it is about suppression of Black people, but that is just my opinion. Here in the United States, we have places called Cancer Alley. That's in Louisiana. And that is a whole section of people that has been highly contaminated. There was one other group of people that were so contaminated that everybody in the whole area was getting Parkinson's. But who didn't get Parkinson's? Well, the people that smoked weren't getting the Parkinson's. So, yeah, it is really kind of hard to tell. I think it's important to do it from the standpoint of what it's doing to our bodies, not exactly how many statistics they can rig up, right? Because another thing that I was absolutely not aware of, and this has to do with another thing to do with our lungs. The Spanish flu of 1918, I had no clue, but this is interesting. They say a researcher in demography at UC Berkeley has evidence, maybe, that undetected tuberculosis or TB actually may have caused much of the mortality in 1918. Here again, they were breathing something and they were getting TB, and a lot of people were dying, and they said it was a Spanish flu. But they say that the 500,000 deaths of the 1918 flu were nearly identical to the number of people who would have succumbed to TB if the pandemic never appeared. Just after 1918, TB death rates experienced their steepest decline of the century. The decline was more extreme for males. The 1918 flu also disproportionately killed males. So yeah, I think that this has a lot to do with selective murder, right? Because what are the drugs that bring in the most pharma revenue? Well, oncology, and that means cancer. Oncology is the big winner. If you look at any sales chart for how much they bring in overall money, it is oncology. It goes higher than immunosuppressants, anti-diabetics, vaccines, all of that. The money is in oncology. So, yeah, follow the money, right? So they just did a program for the American Literacy Project. The average American reads at the 7th to 8th grade level. Yeah, make it easier to sell this stuff now, won't it? So anyway, what I'm going to be talking to you next about is that pick a cause that you're going to stick with. Do you think that eating better is going to help you, well, then of all means, and do that. What's going to happen next is that look for single source food. Stop buying things with large groups of ingredients. I will explain to you what I've been doing because I'm not really sure. I don't have anybody to, I don't know any other people that are getting radiated in their homes to talk about this, but I'll tell you about what happened with me when I've been doing a lot of fasting. And what happened at first was that I have been pretty much eating within like a 4-hour time frame. I'll eat between like 7 and 11 in the morning, and that's it till the next day. And then I drink lemon water, and I stop my fluids about 3 or 4 in the afternoon just because I don't want to have my kidneys activated all night when I'm sleeping. So I basically was eating within a 4-hour window. But ideally, it's best to eat just once a day. But so what happened was that I was eating within that 4-hour window. I only use fresh ingredients and all that kind of stuff. Limit what you use from a can. People say, "Oh, it's really easy. Just throw a bunch of cans into a thing, make a bunch of soup." Now, you want to start with your own fresh ingredients to begin with, right? Because limit how many cans of things you put into your soup you're going to make, right? I may only put like 1 small can of tomatoes, and I'll put 2 huge tomatoes, fresh ones, into the pot. So just start to plan your meals. Like, so for what I'm doing is on Mondays, I cook my soup. So on Tuesday through Saturday, I'm eating 1 meal a day. And then on Sunday, I don't eat all day. And then on Monday, I fix my soup for the rest of the week. But so what happened was I was doing the eating within the 4-hour window. So then I started having trouble with my hands. I assumed it meant because radiation goes after your weak points first. So my hands and my joints have been having issues. So I thought, well, it was probably the radiation going into my joints. And because it goes after the bone marrow, the weakest parts first. So what I do is I don't take that one thing and escalate it. In other words, I don't know what's going to happen next, so I don't play like I know. So I noticed that my right hand all of a sudden starts swelling, and the right hand was the hand that was hurting more. So I'm looking at my hand. I see my right hand, my fingers on my right hand start visibly swelling and getting red. Well, this goes on for about 2 days, and I didn't take it any further. I just thought, wow, that's not looking good, right? And my fingers kept getting, I took pictures of it all. So my fingers started getting swollen, but only like right up to my knuckle area. Well, so the swelling went on for a couple of days, and then literally I started burning from the inside out. My hand just started all of a sudden spontaneously bleeding. I mean, I felt like I was in the middle of a sci-fi movie. So all of a sudden, I end up with it looked like cuts on my hand. All of a sudden, I had these cuts appear on my hand, and I'm bleeding. It's the strangest thing. So I thought, wow, this is not looking good. So there was nothing more I could do about it, right? I saw my hand was bleeding. I thought, wow, this could be a real bummer if my hands start going crazy. But here again, I stop myself and I say, okay, we don't know anymore right now, so let's just deal with what I know. So what happened was this. So I'm watching my hand and it just starts spontaneously bleeding. And then I think, wow, maybe I better up the fasting game. So what I did was the next day, I started eating just once a day instead of during that 4-hour thing. I just ate once a day, and my hand went down. So I started eating once a day, and then last week, I don't want to, doesn't matter what day or not. But anyway, so then last week I started fasting on Sunday, and then I'll make my food for the week on Monday. So that's my schedule for now, is that I'm eating 1 meal a day, only preparing whole foods, and also store your foods and get yourself a case of 32-ounce canning jars. It'll cost you about $20. Things that you use for your soup, like carrots and celery and stuff. Do you realize you can store carrots and celery in those canning jars with water? Just keep them submerged in water. They'll last for about a month. Just change the water every 3 or 4 days. So that way you'll always have the ingredients you need to make fresh soup on hand if you learn to preserve the food you have. And if you use those canning jars, you can then store your soup in that. So then people act like, oh, it's so complicated. No, it's not. I know that I'm going to make my soup on Monday. So what that means is I soak my beans for 48 hours. So since I know I'm going to be cooking beans on Monday, on Saturday, I'm down to my last bottle of soup that I made for the week, right? So what I do with that is I lost my thought. Wait a second. Anyway, so I'm down to by Saturday, I'm down to my last jar in the refrigerator of the soup and the vegetables. And what I do for each soup is I add condiments. Like I might add some fresh onions to the soup. I might add some avocado to the soup. I might add, I'm not eating enough raw. I need to eat more raw. So I add kale and spinach to my soup, or I eat it raw. So that's what I've been eating. And the miracle happened. The swelling in my hand went down. The spots where the blood was coming out of are barely even, you can't even really see them. The scar has just completely disappeared. My right hand is just a little tiny bit redder than my other hand, but no, it's not any longer. So I think what was happening was that the way I was fasting was starting to flush out the toxins. The toxins rose to the surface. And the same week that I had the trouble with my hand, I was nauseous 4 days that week. Totally radiation nauseous, just like I'd had chemo or something. And I could tell that there's not more radiation in my house than there was before because I've got all my windows open. This is my third winter without heat, so I have my thermostat set at 44 still. So the cats aren't sick, so I know it's not the radiation in my house that made me sicker last week. The only thing I could figure is that probably I'm just releasing a lot of toxins. So I'll keep you posted. I think it's because of the toxins. So when you fast, just be very aware of this. You may start releasing some toxins. And remember this, these are all things that we have control over. Nobody is going to force you to go ahead and start eating some sugar or doing any of the things that you don't want to do. Make up your own mind. And by properly sleeping and giving your body the first group of food that it really needs, a lot of those cravings will start to go away. But will they completely go away? I don't really know. That would be up for you to figure out. I still feel like eating sugar. Like I would be naturally inclinated to, if I had a choice right now to have some delicious pineapple, I'd probably gobble it down. But I have to use what's called willpower. So, yeah, so I think that it depends on what you want to do. We have made it this far on to the game floor. We didn't get here on just by accident. We're here because we want to succeed, right? I have been limiting my salt. There's a really famous cancer diet called the Gerson diet. They recommend no salt. I use a little bit of salt still. I think the best success is if you gradually move over and just make the change. Get that fresh air coming in. Remember, the radiation inside of our homes is worse during the summertime. So whatever you can do to get your health moving forward, that's what you're going to need to do. But keep in mind this, none of this is mandatory. You are the one that has a choice of all this. We are essentially back at the Gilded Age right now. The Gilded Age was when they came up with all the horrible food production and distribution. Things are going to reverting more and more back to that. I would not have much trust in things that I would find on the grocery store shelves that were mixed up and concocted by these people, because just because they say it on the label doesn't mean that it's good for us. So I've said enough for now. I'm going to close this off for now. So be safe out there. I'll be back with the gypsies and the Jews. Stay tuned.